Okay.
There you go.
Are
Can everybody hear us? Are we back?
I mean, like, look,
All
I
right, we're back.
remember
We're
how
back.
like we hated on how like simple
Yeah, yeah.
StreamYard was.
That StreamYard didn't have all the bells and whistles and all the fanciness and alerts. Uh, like I said, it's this. It's like you know when Brooks got out of prison in Shawshank Redemption and like the world was just too flashy and there's too much technology. Um, that's where I feel like I'm at right now in OBS.
Okay. So, Pat, take over for a second. I'm gonna go splash some cold water on my face to
A little cold water on your neck.
relieve some of the anxiety I've got right now.
Okay,
I'll be
do
right
that
back,
and then come
chat.
back with the head in the game. So, my co-host is going to splash a little cold water on his neck so we can get in the game here. Today is the first day of Black History Month, and you know what that means, right? That means that every neocon political pundit will be jumping into their respective programming, offering whitewashed, ahistorical revisionist interpretations of black leaders so that they can fit into the liberal orthodoxy that is so palatable to American masses, and we will be attempting to counteract that erroneous rebranding of civil rights leaders. So as we had already stated before, if you weren't here, we are reading The Sword and the Shield, The Revolutionary Lives of Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. This is by Peniel E. Josph. We're going to get into their background in a moment once Johnny's back. And then we will get into, we've got a lot of footage compiled. We've got a lot of quotes compiled. So I think this is going to be a really good intro to the overall thesis of the book and kind of what to expect over the next month as we go through the chapters. Hey, Johnny.
Hey, Pat.
Okay, so I was going to say, would you want to get started? How would you say you want to start off with a little Ben Shapiro,
All right. Yeah.
just to set the tone of what we're kind of dealing with and the examples of what we were saying in terms of kind of what the like growing like the mainstream narratives are surrounding Martin Luther King, and kind of what we're going to be contextualizing throughout this book. So, can I send you a link on?
Send
Too
it to me
close.
right in the Discord.
Okay. And this is actually a new one. There's years of this, but this is something that he just said that he just got into on Martin Luther King Day. So I figured that this would be a good place for us to start to kind of get a vibe of what like the neocon, and this is not even exclusive just to neoconservatism, but this is also liberals and many establishment Democrats would probably believe very similar things. You're going to want to start this around the 6 minute mark. I'm not really too concerned about him talking about the monument or any of that monument discussion, just more so like talking about the day and the legacy of Martin Luther King. So what you're going to notice here is I think that some of these conservative pundits
Mattress for your body
understand
and
that
sleep
it's a.
tight. Your mattress will come
Can you pause it real quick? That it's a losing game to try and rebrand to remove like some of the economic prescriptions that were espoused by Martin Luther King, and now they have to play this game, this very selective game of like, oh, Martin Luther King is day and his legacy is only allowed to be what like the white establishment has chosen it to be, and all other allusion to his ideas of the poor, ideas of redistributive policies need to be left out in favor of only focusing on one line of one speech. So let's let this run. We'll kind of know exactly what's going on here. Hash Kush, good to see you. How are you?
right to your door, shipped for free. Plus, Helix has a 10-year warranty. You can try it out for 100 nights at risk-free. They'll even pick it up for you if you don't love it, but you will. For a limited
Get
time,
2 free
Helix is offering
pillows.
up to $350 off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. It's their best offer yet. Hurry on over to helixsleep.com/Ben. With Helix, better
Just in
sleep
case
starts
you were
right now.
sleeping on the Subversive History
Okay,
Twitch
so every
stream,
Martin
you
Luther
can
King
get
Jr.
2
Day,
free
we get a
pillows.
bevy of think pieces in left-wing media talking about, in order to live up to the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., we basically have to engage in a woke Bernie Sanders redistributionist agenda. So today's example comes courtesy of Esau McCauley, writing for the New York Times, the kind of revolution that Martin Luther King Jr. envisioned. Quote, in 1968, 4 days before he was shot on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. delivered his last Sunday sermon at the Washington National Cathedral in Washington, D.C. It was entitled Remaining Awake Through a Great Revolution, and although King doesn't say the word woke, he uses the concept as it was understood by many black folks then, well before the term was co-opted by the political right to refer to any left-leaning policy it wanted to condemn. The sermon is an opportunity to encounter the real King, who is too often obfuscated by politicians who use his legacy to support their own agendas. They contend that King was colorblind, when in fact his policy aims were unapologetically color conscious. Okay, well, if that were the part of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday that we were actually celebrating, okay, but that's not what we're celebrating. If you had asked people in 1983, when this was enshrined into federal law, are they in favor of a national holiday that enshrines the idea of group redistributionism? The answer is no. There would not have been support for that. The thing that every school child learns when they are in school about Martin Luther King Jr. is the I Have a Dream speech, right? One of the great speeches in American rhetorical history. That speech is replete with references to the idea that we should all view each other as God's creatures without reference to color. An attempt to
Can you
backfill
pause it real
that by
quick?
looking at the fact that Martin Luther King Jr. was economically socialistic.
So this is kind of like what we're saying. So this was not the conservative game plan a couple years ago. A couple years ago is that Martin Luther King would have been against all of this kind of identity politic kind of idea of that, like, you know, we need to like take like an intersectional view of like what it's like to be black in the United States, and that maybe there's a different experience, and that maybe there is some like reparations in store for the decades and centuries of discrimination and prejudice. They would say that just because he said that, he doesn't even say that you should. If I listened to the I Have a Dream speech recently, they don't say you should treat people by the content of the character, not the color of their skin. Not saying he doesn't believe that, but the actual thing is, I hope my children will grow up, his black children, to grow up to be judged by the content of the character, not the color of their skin. So that kind of gets taken out of context quite a bit as well.
So technically, after all these years of like right wingers using that, he's not even talking about everybody. He's talking about specifically his children, his black children.
He talks about his daughters. Well, that line, judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin, is in reference to his children growing up.
Okay, how am I now? Am I better? There we go. Okay, sorry. Look, there's going to be a lot of technical issues on this episode, you know?
Okay, everybody's saying we're good. Everybody's
Okay.
saying we're good. Yeah, and we'll,
So-
we'll throw that out there again. We are, you know, just doing a dry run of this OBS thing. We like the last 30 minutes has been us setting this all up.
Yeah.
We are cavemen. We are rubbing sticks together, and we are terrified by the technology that has presented itself in front of us. Please be please be gentle with us as we embark on this frightening adventure.
And everyone thank SebsDev so much for helping
Yeah,
us
Sebs
figure
is
this out.
legit.
This would not be happening without them.
So now, instead of just trying to just like, you know, distract and rebrand Martin Luther King, now the playbook is, yeah, sure, he was an economic socialist, but that's not why we like him. So we're going to compartmentalize all that over here, and we're not going to think about that. And we're going to look at this one speech and this one line of the one speech, and that is what we're going to hinge the entire legacy of Martin Luther King on. And then we can just pretty much discredit the rest of his legacy, his beliefs, and you know, because it is too. The conservatives have come to the conclusion that it's too optically damaging to wholesale reject Dr. King. So they have to play this mental gymnastics of being like, no, he's a great liberal, and he you know, believed in all these, you know, color blindness. Even though I searched this as well, there has never been a single speech where Dr. King referred to color blind. Yeah, and Cinnamon Challenge. That's another thing. He's like, oh, well, the people in 1983, do you think that that's what they want to do? It's like, who, federalized a holiday for Martin Luther King in 1983? And does that mean that we have to adhere to whatever their standards are of who Martin Luther King was? We'll get into some of the American government opinions of Martin Luther King when he was alive. That's going to be in here as well. So let's continue with the video to just see him
Yes,
go a little bit more into this.
Let's see lip filler McShrimp Boy continue to go
Yeah,
on about. Oh, dude, check this out. Look, you don't see that? If you look at older videos of him, he does not have this lip filler fucking like migrating, I believe is the term, right? From his lip right into like, the lower part of like, his face.
That's so funny.
Yeah. No,
Maybe,
also, did you know that he's wearing a yarmulke in like literally
yeah,
every
he always
single...
wears a yarmulke.
I've never noticed
I'm
that.
fine with the yarmulke. You can wear
No,
a
I mean,
yarmulke.
I'm not saying I have a problem. I'm just saying I just noticed that like recently. Like I never realized that.
Yeah, it blends in most of the time. He wears one that's very close to his hair color. So and I don't think you see him on the back too often.
Right.
Does not change the fact that that is not what we are actually celebrating about Martin Luther King Jr. on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. And trying to claim that that is what we are celebrating is silly. Or that that's what we should be celebrating, because in order to celebrate the part of the legacy we like, we have to celebrate the whole thing. Wrong. We don't have to celebrate his treatment of women, and we don't have to celebrate his socialistic redistributionist policies either. There are a bunch of things about Martin Luther King Jr. that are not worth celebrating, and then there are a bunch of things that are worth celebrating, and those are not the same thing. However, again, the idea here is that if you really, really want the Martin Luther King Jr. revolution, what you need is a compelling case for reparations based on the debt this country owes its black citizens. By the way, even if you were going to make this case in 1968, like directly in the aftermath of Jim Crow, it's very difficult to make that case in 2023. You're talking about half a century later. But, says this columnist for King, waking up is not simply understanding that racism is bad. It is acknowledging that racism created generational wealth for white Americans and robbed black Americans of the same economic boost. The racial wealth gap King highlighted in his sermon not only persists, but according to some studies is basically the same as it was in 1968. Well, then I have a question. The United States has undertaken spending of tens of trillions of dollars in social redistributionist schemes, ranging from food stamps to welfare to government-subsidized housing to government-subsidized college admissions policy that is racially discriminatory in nature. And the wealth gap remains. Why is it that wealth gap remains when it has closed for virtually every other minority in the United States?
All this.
Okay.
I don't want to turn this into a Ben Shapiro like debunk stream where we're just gonna I really just kind of wanted to set the perspective. But this whole thing where like you compare black the economic progress of black people to other minority groups, frequently they are compared with Asian people.
Right.
So there's this really have you ever thought about this dynamic? When did most black people, let's call it, came to this country or entered this country?
You mean like in chains? Like
yes,
sold at auction? Like
yes, the chains and the auction and everything like that. So now, do you know that in the 1800s there was actually a Chinese Exclusion Act? You're aware of this, correct?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
The Chinese Exclusion Act in the 1800s.
Oh, that was
18.
was like against. That was like 18. Was it?
It might have been the early 1900s.
I thought it was in the 1830s or 1840s. Was it in the 1900s?
So I 1882. So this came pretty much to combat coolie labor, as it was called, where a lot of people were being brought from Asia, not only Chinese people, different Asian, even Indian individuals were being brought over to work there, and a like rabid anti-Asian sentiment came across, especially the West Coast. There was like massacres in California and things like that. So I bring that all up to say this, is that most immigrants from Asia that enter this country, how did they get here? Because most of the ones that you're going to be using in these demographics, or at least the families that came from that make up these demographics, came after the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Right. I mean, wasn't another part of like the Chinese Exclusion Act that even the people that were here like were no longer considered citizens or could not even seek citizenship?
Yeah. Well, the point, I'm not sure about the specifics of it, but okay, so Liar Judas pretty much said it. Whether they came from rich families or not, they came from well-off enough families that they were able to immigrate, that they were able to afford the process of immigration. So when you look at the trajectory of other minority groups, especially Asian, because they love to say that, they love to be like, look at how good Asian people are doing. Why can't black people do that good? And they can do that good. They're alluding that there's some kind of genetic deficiency, and they dog whistle this by saying cultural. There's
Right.
cultural issues,
Right.
and they don't put any type of more of this like historical sociology into the mix. That you have a base of a population that was, like you said, in chains and did not even have. He's like sitting here and trying to be like, oh, what? Maybe in 1968 that would have been fine, but in 2023 we're talking about less than one person's lifespan at this point, and he acts like it's been like hundreds of years.
Yeah,
But
Hashkush hit the nail on the head with the model minority myth that gets put on a lot of like Asian diaspora in America a lot. Um, and Liar Judas, thank you for complimenting the badges. They were made by Earth Liberation Studios on Instagram, and you can check out their website too and buy some of their artwork. Um, why did I even bother going to American schools? Yeah, like it's this is why I think that the work that Gerald Horne does is so important, because it's like, imagine if somebody like Malcolm X was armed with the kind of like historical research that is available today that Gerald Horne writes about.
right.
Imagine how much
So
more scathing, how much more like sharp and refined that knife of a commentary that, like, he was able to make in his time, right, with his level of education.
right, and this is the case with like so many individuals that we look at. Even Dr. King, Dubois. You know what I mean? Or Du Bois. Okay. So let's we can cut the video here.
Okay.
There's really not much else really to watch from old Ben. I just wanted to set a standard of like the things that are like commonly purported. And there has been some progression, because now at least the conservatives have to begrudgingly admit that Dr. King was in favor of socialistic redistribution policies that actually targeted specific minority groups. In his case, mostly pertaining to black communities. Whereas, for decades, they paraded Dr. King around as if he was some kind of like poster child for, you know, the liberal hegemonic orthodoxy that they would normally be parading. So we're going to go into the book. First thing, did you want to bring up? I have that Wikipedia link on there if we wanted to check out the author real quick, just to get a little of his background for
Sure.
everyone.
All right, let's hope
Okay.
this doesn't fuck up.
Okay, cool. Now,
Perfect.
can you zoom in a little bit for me? Oh, there you
Absolutely.
go. You're just a peach. Okay. So Peniel Josph is an American scholar, teacher, and public voice on race issues, especially the history of the Black Power movement. He holds a joint professorship appointment at the LBJ School of Public Affairs in the History Department of the University of Texas at Austin, UT Austin. Josph joined UT Austin, blah, blah, blah. Joe also serves as vice president of the board of directors at the Bayard Rustin Center for Social Justice, LGBTQIA Safe Space, Community Activist Center, Education Enclave, dedicating to honoring Bayard Rustin through their mission and good works. At UT Austin, Josph holds the Barbara Jordan Chair Professor in Ethics and Political Values. Can you go down a little bit?
Do you know anything about Bayard Rustin?
I know he was a homosexual, and I know he was a socialist. So he sounds
Well,
based.
at first. I hope this book goes into a little bit about Bayard Rustin, but
It doesn't. Well, to my recollection, it doesn't. I don't think that it really has a lot to do. Well, does he have to do with Dr. King or anything?
he kind of goes from like being a socialist to not. I know, David. I'm sorry to break everyone's heart. I wish that he stayed being kind of cool. He did not.
All right. Let's see what we got here. He was born in New York. His mother's Haitian, immigrant to the United States. Major influence on his current work because of her. Stokely Carmichael, later Kwame Ture, and other related leaders were household names during Joseph's upbringing. If you go down into like his work, go down. He actually has a book. Go up.
Which one? Stokely?
I thought he had a Stokely. Yeah, he actually has he actually did an autobiography on Stokely Carmichael.
That's sick.
which is cool. But yeah, so that's just to give you a little bit of the background of the author to understand who's writing the book, whose perspective we're taking in here.
Oh, he just came out with another book.
What's it called?
The Third Reconstruction: America's Struggle for Racial Justice in the 21st Century.
Yeah, it's probably cool.
All right, let's just, for everybody, you know, later in life, still devoted to securing workers' rights, Rust enjoying the other union leaders and aligning with the ideological neoconservatism. And after his death, President Ronald Reagan praised him. So let's just leave it at that. Everybody, you know, can go do their own research about who Bayard Rustin is or was, you know, whatever way, you know, you want to do that. Oh, man.
No, not Bobby Seale. I think you're talking. I think you might be talking about Eldridge Cleaver.
No,
But
I'm not.
He went a little further than Lib. No, David said, "Who's that Black Panther that turned into a Lib?"
Oh, right,
I
right,
think
right. Yeah, no, he
I
is
think
thinking
Bobby
of
Seale.
Eldridge
I think Bobby
Cleaver. He
Seale.
went on to become like a born again Christian or something.
Yeah, yeah. Also, like a lot of other abhorrent shit. But I'm pretty sure it was Cleaver. I'm pretty sure Bobby Seale is still down with the cause.
Possibly.
Anarchist Laboratory, Sean, what's up? Thanks for being here. All right, what are we doing here?
All right, yeah. What are we doing?
I don't know.
You want to do
Okay,
this?
so this is the first thing that I wanted. The first slide here. It's framed as a debate between Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. This is not a debate. There was never a formal debate between these two. This is kind of like dueling clips of,
Right.
Malcolm's position and Martin's position. Malcolm is a little bit more inflammatory. We actually talk shit directly at Martin Luther King, but this is to show kind of like that there were contrasts between these two, but this is something that was being remedied later in their lives. Let's let's start this video and you can kind of get an idea of where both of them were kind of coming from and like why there is this concept of separation between the two of them. And you can hit full screen on this when you play it. It'd be helpful. All right, perfect.
Is that perfect?
No, it's not perfect at all. Bring it back. It was okay, you got to go back to presentation view.
Okay.
I guess we're just gonna have to do it like this. That's fine though.
The white man pays Reverend Martin Luther King, subsidizes Reverend Martin Luther King, so that Reverend Martin Luther King can continue to teach the Negroes to be defenseless. That's what you mean by nonviolent. Be defenseless. Be defenseless in the face of one of the most cruel beasts that has ever taken the people into captivity. That's this American white man. And they have proved it throughout the country by the police dogs and the police clubs. 100 years ago, they used to put on a white sheet and use a bloodhound against Negroes. Today, they have taken off the white sheet and put on police uniforms. They've traded in the bloodhounds for police dogs, and they're still doing the same thing. And just as Uncle Tom, back during slavery, used to keep the Negroes from resisting the bloodhound or resisting the...
Can you pause this real quick?
Teaching them
Yeah.
to love their enemy or pray for those...
Anarchist Laboratory, Sean, that is exactly correct. What you're saying in terms of what Kwame said is exactly what is being brought up in this book, is that we'll get into this in detail in a moment, but he championed nonviolence, and then what happens is Malcolm X gets murdered, and then also even after the Civil Rights Act passed, that's when the Watts riots happened. So he's watching progress happen, but also like, you know, black people are still being murdered. So, and then the Vietnam War is really when he like takes like a much more radical stance against things. So just hang out, just everybody. This is all coming. We're going to detail this all pretty exclusive. There's going to be a lot of detail coming. Jeez. Go ahead.
Use them despitefully. Today, Martin Luther King is just a 20th century or modern Uncle Tom or a religious Uncle Tom who is doing the same thing today to keep Negroes defenseless in the face of attack that Uncle Tom...
Yeah, he's really going in on King.
Keep those Negroes defenseless in the face of the attack of the Klan in that
Well,
day.
I don't think of love as, in this context, as emotional bosh. I don't think of it as a weak force, but I think of love as something strong and that organizes itself into powerful direct action. This is what I tried to teach in the struggle in the South, that we are not engaged in a struggle that means we sit down and do nothing.
Is the video volume low for anyone else?
It's so low. I can barely hear it.
Resistance to evil and nonviolent.
Go into the thing. Go into the can you see if the it's down on the video?
It's all the way up, man.
Wherein nonviolent resistance means that you do resist in a very strong and determined manner. And I think some of the criticisms of
Sebs, do you know why like the audio would be coming through so I don't know if you can send us a message or something.
Very strong, and they confuse non-resistance with non-violence.
The goal of Dr. Martin Luther King is to give Negroes a chance to sit in a segregated restaurant beside the same white man who had brutalized them for 400 years. The goal of Dr. Martin Luther King is to get Negroes to forgive the people who have brutalized them for 400 years by lulling them to sleep and making them forgetting what those whites have done to them. But the masses of black people in America today don't go for what Martin Luther King is putting down. As you said in one of your articles, it's psychologically insecure, or something of that sort. I forget how you put it. But you didn't endorse what Martin Luther King was doing yourself.
I do not reject his goals of full integration and full equality rights for American citizens. Do you reject these goals?
If you don't think that he's walking on the right road, I'm quite sure you don't agree that he'll get to the right place. And if you would classify his method as psychologically unrealistic, I think that if a man's method is psychologically unrealistic, which means the road or the means or the method that he's using, I think as a psychologist, you'd be very doubtful
I don't think
that he would reach the right.
If anyone has ever lived with a non-violent movement.
Anarchist Laboratory Sean Malcolm's biography is very cool.
Through the freedom rides and through the sit-in movement and the recent Birmingham movement, and see the reactions of many of the extremists and reactionaries in the white community. He wouldn't say that this movement makes, or this philosophy makes him comfortable. I think it arouses a sense of shame within him often in many instances.
First book tap.
I think it does something to touch the conscience and establish a sense of guilt. Now, so often people respond to guilt by engaging more in the guilt-evoking act in an attempt to drown the sense of guilt. But this approach certainly doesn't make the white man feel comfortable. It disturbs the other things, conscience, and it disturbs this sense of contentment.
Nothing will they ever do. They will always talk it, but they won't practice it. And with the Supreme Court, if the NAACP can tell me that they want a desegregation decision for me 10 years ago, but yet the schools haven't been desegregated, as I say, this is a victory with no victory. It's a victory that you can talk about, but it's a victory you can't show me. So if you represent the NAACP and you...
Yeah, Malcolm is like super based. Like when you listen to these old speeches,
when I look at you, I have to conclude that either you have been duped yourself, or else you were trying to dupe me.
Welcome.
And in
trying to run OBS as
the
best we
civil
can.
rights struggle is involved. There is no civil rights leader can point to me one concrete gain, practical gain, that black people have made in the civil rights field in this country, not only during the past 10 years, but during the past 100 years.
I don't think there's any real organization to the riots. I think they grow out of the conditions that I've mentioned.
Crazy how they can doctor, like not doctor, but like enhance footage now.
As long as these intolerable conditions are there, as long as the Negro finds himself living every day in a major depression, then every city will sit
this sounds good. This sounds very good.
A powder keg and can explode over the slightest incident. I feel that killing is a very tragic way to deal with any social problem. There is no violent solution to the problem that the Negro confronts in this country, and this is why I have constantly said that riots are socially destructive and self-defeating. After all, the Negro ends up on the losing end. We can't win a violent revolution. Most of the persons killed in riots are Negroes themselves. The persons who end up not being able to get milk for their children of Negroes because things where they have to live are destroyed. So there's no practical or moral answer in the realm of violence to the Negro's problem. But I do understand the sociological, the psychological, and the economic reasons.
The problem can be solved. First, the white man and the black man have to be able to sit down at the same table. The white man has to feel free to speak his mind without hurting the feelings of that Negro. And the so-called Negro has to feel free to speak his mind without hurting the feelings of the white man. Then they can bring the issues that are under the rug out on top of the table.
With the audio on this one, there's no subtitles for this part, I guess.
That's the only way that they'll ever do it. We need an action program while we are Muslims, or while we are Christians, or while we are whatever we are. We still need an action program that will eliminate these evils that are in our community. This is what we're trying to do with the Muslim Mosque Incorporated. Do you consider yourself
militant? You hear this?
I consider myself...
Oh, there you go. There's some subtitles coming through.
We have to agree that this appears to be the result of an internal conflict within the black nationalist movement. So I think the first thing that needs to be done is for a conference of goodwill to take place between black nationalist leaders. This was why I suggested a few days ago that the followers of the late Malcolm X and the followers of Elijah Muhammad should sit down at the peace table together, so to speak, and discuss this problem.
8-bit bot came in, and is that 8 bits that they gave us?
I don't think, and I'm sure, that
first time in chat, sprinkling a little bit of bits on us. Thank you.
New and more complex social problems. I think it is unfortunate for the black nationalist movement. I think it is unfortunate for the health of our nation.
I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
I'm really happy for you. I'm gonna let you finish. But Beyonce had one of the best videos of all time.
Oh, I forgot this. This is the end of it. Somebody put Kanye West at the end of it. And this picture that you're seeing right here is the first time that Martin Luther King and Malcolm X met one another. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that in one moment. What is Seb saying? What's up? Johnny, I can't hear you, man. I can't hear you.
Here, do you think they made this video like way before the last like 6 months, I guess?
Yeah. I forgot. That's like at the very end there. I don't know when it came out. It has millions of views on it though, which is interesting. Okay, so let's move to the next slide.
Why is it doing that?
You just have to go past it. There you go. Okay, so just based on the picture that they showed at the end of that video, go back, please. Okay, March 24th, 1964. So what this day is this is a day when the Civil Rights Act had passed, but it was being filibustered. Can you go down to that Wikipedia link at the bottom there, just to give everybody a little bit more context on this? Okay, so I think we're all kind of aware of what the Civil Rights Act is. If you're not, it was in 1964. It was a trademark civil rights labor law in the United States that outlaws discrimination based on race, color, religion, and sex, national origin. It prohibits unequal application of voter registration requirements, racial segregation in schools, and public accommodations. The act remains one of the most significant legislative achievements in American history. So go down. We're going to go down to the opposition of it just to... go down. Okay, hold on. Up. Okay, so the political repercussions, go down. Yeah, there you The bill divided both major American political parties and engaged in a long-term change in the demographics of support for each. President Kennedy realized that supporting the bill would risk losing the South's overwhelming support of the Democratic Party. So up until this time, the South was like a Democrat haven. But Robert F. Kennedy and Vice President Johnson had pushed for the introduction of the civil rights legislation. Johnson told Kennedy aide Ted Sorensen that I know the risks are very great. We might lose the South, but those sorts of states may be lost anyway. So if you go down just a little bit further to that second paragraph, although major majorities in both parties voted for the bill, there were notable exceptions. Though he opposed forced segregation, Republican 1964 presidential candidate Senator Barry Goldwater of Arizona voted against the bill, remarking, "You can't legislate morality." Goldwater had supported previous attempts to pass the civil rights legislation in 57 and 60, as well as in the 24th Amendment outlawing the poll tax. He stated the reason for his opposition in 1964 was Bill Title II, which, in his opinion, violated individual liberty and states' rights. Democrats and Republicans from the southern states opposed the bill and led an unsuccessful 60 working day filibuster, including Senators Albert Gore Sr., J. William Fulbright, these are both Democrats, as well as Senator Robert Byrd, who's also a Democrat, who personally filibustered for 14 hours straight. So this act of filibuster...
I don't know what that means, Liar Judas.
Yeah, so this filibuster is what Malcolm and Martin Luther King, where they first met, where they had like the first formal meeting. So go back to that picture from the slides. You can leave the Wikipedia now.
Oh wait, I forgot. There we go. Okay. Well, what am I doing next?
Well, so go back to the slides. So that filibuster that we were just bringing up, this picture right here is in DC. This is where the two men first met. So now we're going to go into some of the words of the author. Martin and Malcolm would never develop a personal friendship, but their political visions would grow closer together throughout their lives. A mythology surrounds the legacies of Martin and Malcolm. King is most comfortably portrayed as the nonviolent insider, while Malcolm is characterized as a by any means necessary political renegade. But their relationship, even in that short meeting, defies the myths about their politics and activism. So this lays out a little bit of like what the common themes are that surround these two men and why they might be a bit misconceived. So let's go to the next slide. All right. Martin and Malcolm both recognized the pivotal role that violence played in maintaining America's racial caste system, a system that defined white violence against black bodies as legitimate, legal, and morally just, and regarded black violence, even in defense of a black humanity, as criminal, dangerous, and a threat to law and order. That's what they're saying. That's the perception. They're not condemning it as that. Don't get mixed up with the words. As a criminal, dangerous, and threat to law and order, meaning that there is a disparity between how white violence is perceived versus how black violence, even when it's defensive. Malcolm, who cultivated a well-earned reputation for deploying words of fire, arrived in Washington chastened by his recent acrimonious departure from the Nation of Islam. So up until this point, for those of you who didn't know the story of Malcolm X, he was a devout proponent of the Nation of Islam. And then prior to this 1964 meeting with Dr. Martin Luther King, this is when he had left the Nation of Islam. He avoided his usually blunt language, even as he characterized the entire debate as a con game that threatened to provoke a race war if the government was not serious about civil rights enforcement. King spoke of violence as an evil that lurked within Pandora's box, that the nation might, if civil rights legislation was passed, still avoid. I hate to discuss violence, but realism impels me to admit that if this bill is not passed in strength, it will be harder to keep the struggle disciplined. King confessed to reporters. In Washington, Malcolm and Martin found their usual political identities inverted. Malcolm addressed reporters as a budding statesman, an unelected dignitary who identified as moral authority in the thousands of black faces in Harlem, the black capital of America. King made no such public claims of leadership. Instead, he surveyed a tense national racial climate and declared the passage of the Civil Rights Bill to be the only plausible mechanism that might prevent larger racial storms from engulfing the nation.
So It's funny, Liar Judas, as we read this book, they're going to go a lot deeper into that journey, of his disillusionment and how it may have actually even preceded his journey on Hajj.
Yep. Do you have anything to say about this paragraph or anything before we move forward, or?
Nothing. I just think that it bears repeating that this book, right? It's fairly new. Came out in 2020, so like a lot of us, I'm sure, feel very educated on both of these figures, and that there may be some things in this book that are new to us.
For me, I feel like a lot of that comes for Martin Luther King than it does about Malcolm X, because I feel that Malcolm has never really been bastardized the same way that King has. He's just been like tucked away from memory because he's too dangerous. Like there's not like as much of a co-opting that rebrands him in an inauthentic way. There's just like a erasure of him or a vilification of him.
Right.
So most of this like re-education comes around King, but also there's a lot to be said about the pragmatism and the like righteousness of Malcolm that doesn't get discussed a lot. He's looked at as this like militant Islamist race, if you want to use the term racism, anti-white individual, which is not a fair characterization of Malcolm X.
I think that the one interesting thing that's going to come out of this is that I think that when you get into like radical politics from like a left perspective, Malcolm X is often kind of like hailed in almost a little bit higher esteem than Martin Luther King because of the pacifism and because of like the Kwame Ture like speeches, like talking about how like in order for pacifism and nonviolence to work, like your enemy has to have a conscience, all that stuff. So I think that like hopefully this will shine a little bit more of like a light on like where Dr. King was at, like, near the end of his life that, like, we don't really get a whole lot about. Yes, we get told by Kwame Ture later in life that, like, his Vietnam speech, is something that should be, heralded, and what's up?
We have an excerpt of coming in the later slides where I actually have a short excerpt. There's probably going to be a more detailed examination of that speech coming in the next few weeks, but we at least have like a little bit of it just to kind of contextualize what we're going into.
Right. So I think it's going to be kind of interesting to see like where his politics were, even outside of that speech. And I hopefully, this will kind of bring the two of them a lot closer together than like, having this kind of like unevenness about like where they were. Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to read this one?
Sure.
Okay.
By March 1964, both men were experiencing remarkable political transitions. Malcolm pivoted to lobbying, protesting, threatening, and cajoling democratic institutions with the goal of achieving black dignity. His appearance in Washington amplified his quest to wed formal political maneuvers, such as voting rights and policy advocacy, to more maverick and controversial notions of political self-determination, such as gun clubs, self-defense groups, and black nationalist political party. Malcolm engaged with American democratic institutions in a manner that allowed him not only participate in the civil rights struggle, but reframe it as global movement for human rights, one that connected civil rights activism in America with movements for political self-determination in Indonesia and Nigeria. Meanwhile, King's political reputation swelled as the movement he came to personify expanded beyond his full comprehension and control. His long-standing appreciation of the relationship between racial equality and economic justice, what the March on Washington had knowingly called, quote, jobs and freedom, remained thwarted by a nation that refused to contemplate the high price of racial justice, and especially who might pay the cost in privilege, power, standing, wealth, and prestige. King's candid discussion of violence, what he called realism, would rapidly escalate after his meeting with Malcolm. For King, realism produced the sweet spot between aspirations of racial justice and a contemporary reality scarred by Jim Crow.
Yeah, and like this whole like realism thing, like and in the last slide, it talked about like he kind of makes this reference to like I don't know how much longer I can keep a lid on this thing. It's kind of like the vibe that he would give to the media, because I think a lot of people like in the media or in the establishment viewed King as someone like, oh, there's riots in Watts, send Martin Luther King out there to, like, calm everyone down. And he would say, like, if we are still being discriminated against and we are still being treated this way, you know what I mean? There's only so much that can be done to a community before things like this become inevitable.
Right.
So when he's talking about the realism, he's not saying that, like, I'm not offering a rallying call to violence, and I'm not, I am a proponent of nonviolent protest, and I will always abide by nonviolent protest. But also, not to be cliche, everyone knows it. He is someone that coined the term that a riot is the language of the unheard, and if these communities continue to go unheard, these things will be, as I said, inevitable.
I also think it's rather interesting that he brings up Indonesia, right? What else was going on in Indonesia in the 60s?
Right. He was specifically influenced by the Bandung Conference, Third World and Non-Aligned Movement. All right, let's take it to the next slide. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the assassinations just briefly. The assassination of Malcolm X on February 21st, 1965 broke the secret hearts of millions of African Americans who had quietly claimed him as their unspoken champion, alongside the tens of thousands who publicly did so. Malcolm inspired blacks to unapologetically love themselves. He set a fearless example in this regard, offering his story of individual triumph against racism and poverty as a chance at collective redemption for the entire black community. Malcolm's death arrived before the public acknowledgement of black power, a movement birthed from his activism and which would spur King to greater radicalism, more forceful political rhetoric, and an embrace of radical black dignity. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination on April 4th, 1968 was a global tragedy. His untimely death indelibly altered American history, evoking a national trauma that we have yet to recover from. A troubling shadow haunts King's legacy, blunting his impact on American democracy. Over 100 million Americans watched King's funeral on television as major cities convulsed in anger, violence, and mourning in the immediate hours and days after his death. Lyndon Johnson's passage of the Fair Housing Act is usually regarded as a final policy tribute to the racial justice efforts spearheaded by King. Today, more than 50 years after King's death, the struggle for racial justice continues in ways that are both historically recognizable and disconcertingly new. So, according to the author, as we went over his background earlier, that this struggle for racial justice, and this is another comfortable liberal belief in the world, is that after the civil rights, after civil rights bill passed in 1964, we can just wipe our hands. Everything's good now. No need to worry about that whole race thing. And that's just blatantly not the case. As to quote the author, that there's both historically recognizable, meaning that a precedent that has been set for decades and centuries, and then also even new developments in racial inequality in the country. Now, if you want to go to do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I just think it's another little fun fact is that the Black Panther Party was founded October 15th, 1966. So, like, less than a year after,
Yep.
Malcolm
after
was...
brother Malcolm was taken.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you read Revolutionary Suicide by Huey Newton, that was a huge impetus for the organization, of the Black Panthers, was Malcolm himself and then also his assassination.
Right.
And then also, I mean, when you look at the dueling assassinations of both of these people, you can see why there might be a more militarized stance by Black liberation movements from that point forward.
Well,
Actually, go ahead.
I mean, we talk about this all the time, how, like, a lot of, like, actually existing socialist countries, they take on, like, this completely different character by, like, the 60s or 70s, and oftentimes, like, get kind of what's the word, like, called, like, authoritarian, stuff like that, or they're very militant or militarized, right? Like, when you look at, like, let's say the Communist Party of Indonesia, right? It's not very, like, militant, right? Like, they were like any political party, right? When you look at, like, Chile, right? What?
And then they were all murdered.
When you look at Chile, under Allende, right? Like, it wasn't very militant, right? It was just like a political party, you know.
Well, this is also, Guatemala. Guatemala was an example that was touted by Cuba, being like, look what happens when you try to play ball. When you
Right.
try to play ball with the United States and play into their game and even coalesce to their demands.
Right.
Give them, remuneration for the land you take from them. Try to take anything to like make yourself not look like an extremist. And then you still are deposed and immiserated, and your country ends up in a brutal civil war for decades where millions, which, harms millions of people.
Right. Oh, yeah, I believe, and I could be incredibly wrong, but I believe that like the rifle that Allende used to take his life was gifted to him by Fidel, and like Fidel's last words were like, "They're gonna kill you."
Yeah. Tragic. And, I think both of us almost came to tears when we listened to Allende's final speech. If you're looking for a real tear jerker, but also just something that just wells up like the revolutionary spirit in you, man, visit that speech because it's incredible and it's emotional and it's that what a beautiful wordsmith. And to be able to compose that in his last moments is really just Salvador Allende. Check it out. Kim Jong-un continue nuclear testing.
Exactly.
Let's go. So, before we get too detached from this, the next slide is actually a little quick video about the riots that happened after Martin Luther King's assassination.
Oh.
So, this is an age-restricted video. You got to open it on the link. It's very annoying, though, that I had to do this, but I'm sorry.
That I
No,
so
they were never apprehended.
Was the night King was assassinated.
He was also killed very effectively with a sniper rifle, which... if you want to pause it real quick, which is typically not like the disorganized street level murder weapon of choice, or that can be fired accurately directly into a person's head. I don't want to get too conspiratorial about this whole thing, but
no, crank away, crank.
Yeah, sniper rifle. You know what I mean? Like when even if we're actually going to talk about Malcolm X's murder in a little bit with some documents, but I believe Malcolm X was like blown away with like a shotgun, like from someone that ran up to him. Like this is more of the traditional means that you see, like maybe what you could describe as like a lower level less organized, less intelligence fueled type of assassination. But a well placed sniper rifle that is very accurately kills a person is not something that you see in many sectors of society. We'll just leave it at that, right?
And then in ensuing decades, they make a giant carving of him and have a quote of his like in front of like their main office and everything. It's all just kind of fucking weird.
It's a little weird. All right, go.
The chasm between the
Look at that, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Everyone, did you see that?
I don't even know where it went.
That was an alert. That was an alert that we now have on this stream. We are professionals who now have alerts. Go ahead. Those that were struggling for civil rights, like, you had Malcolm X, who had this, certainly a more radical approach to things, who was murdered. And then you had the champion of nonviolence, also brutally murdered. And the two leading, yin and yang of this situation were both brutally murdered. You have, how would you feel if you were like in like some kind of like a, Black organization or someone that was organizing for civil rights? You may feel very disenfranchised with the concept of nonviolence when you see Martin Luther King slain outside of his hotel room like that. I'm not saying that it fully justifies violence, but I'm saying if you were riding along with the campaign of nonviolence and believing Dr. Martin Luther King, who, to the very fiber of his being, tried to live to that credo, to just have his head blown off like that.
I mean, it wasn't even just him. It's literally like almost every single major figure within the civil rights struggle was, murdered in their driveway, assassinated like at a hotel, assassinated, giving a speech, dying of cancer, like you name it.
Yeah.
Which, also leaves the possibility of a CIA cancer gun.
Let's not rule anything out.
I'm just saying, like, they had one.
All right, let's go to the next slide, please.
What the fuck?
You just got to click it.
Clicked it.
There you go. You want to go ahead on this one?
Sure. Beyond dreams and nightmares. In many ways, racial segregation in America has worsened since King's death. National progress has been stalled, indeed reversed, by local, state, and federal policies. From gentrification and zoning laws to tax codes that have made dreams of racial integration as distant as an unseen horizon. Shortly after the passage of fair housing legislation in 1968, Congress passed a national crime bill that planted the seeds for the contemporary crisis of mass incarceration. Like Sleepy Joe. The Safe Streets Act of 1968 successfully helped to reimagine the nation's domestic priorities over the next half century, diverting tens of billions of dollars from anti-poverty, housing, and educational programs into the world's largest prison system. America's criminal justice system warehouses, exploits, punishes, and executes the same brown and black faces King challenged the entire world to embrace and love. It was no accident that Richard Nixon's rhetoric of law and order during the 1968 presidential campaign season flourished in the wake of King's assassination. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. had warned against the specter of massive racial uprisings if the nation remained unwilling to commit to guaranteeing black dignity and black citizenship.
So very important to remember that is that immediately after this whole civil rights issue in the 60s, you had the mass incarceration campaign of Nixon and then ultimately the war on drugs with Reagan. So, you know, to say that the lot of black people in the United States significantly improved, I mean, maybe in some respects, at least in terms of like segregation and things like that, but a whole new slew of issues was imposed upon these communities following that. And we have an interesting video with a very special guest appearance in the next slide. Short video. I wish we could do full screen. We'll work on that.
Hang on. Let me just...
Yeah, there you go.
America's public enemy number one in the United States
Sin Chow, do you actually
is
know?
drug abuse.
Give me the initials.
In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive. This will be a worldwide offensive. Fundamentally, it is essential for the American people to be alerted to this danger, to recognize that it is a danger that will not pass with the passing of the war in Vietnam, which has brought to our attention the fact that a number of young Americans have become addicts as they serve abroad. This offensive deals with the problem there, but will then go on to deal with the problem throughout.
Yeah, we got alerts now.
President Nixon never actually uses the word, but for everyone listening, it's clear.
Nothing is clearly thought out as
you're
your
declaring a war on drugs.
The briefing team will now be ready to answer any questions on the technical details of the program.
Nixon proclaiming this war on drugs is this epic moment. Nixon standing up as the law and order president.
But behind the scenes, there's another agenda at work.
In the eyes of the inner circle of the Nixon administration, the war on drugs brought together the peace movement, the hippies, the counterculture, African Americans. All of this stuff can be captured and addressed by force with law enforcement under the rubric of the war on drugs. And the trick is to create a system that deals with this without appearing to.
Do you want me to pause it?
This
we'll go back.
announcement this morning is the culmination of a project that began about a year
ago. Obama
It'll
bin
be
Laden,
decades before
69
one of Nixon's
420.
top advisors will allegedly admit to a magazine writer this deception behind the origin of the war on drugs.
The Nixon campaign had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and the blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities.
So again, ever, right? The war on drugs, right, that has been a massive failure, was never intended to like stop drugs or anything. It's been a raging success because it's been the greatest excuse to incarcerate the most amount of people.
Right. And for anybody that didn't see, Christian Perenni was just earlier in here. I tried getting Johnny to, I don't know if he
I'm
couldn't hear me
sorry,
or
I missed it.
But Christian Perenni, the son of Michael Perenni, was in this documentary speaking on this situation, if any of you know who Christian Perenni is.
Leaders raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
We got a problem with the blacks. We got a problem with the hippies. What are we going to do? We're going to declare a war on drugs. And we criminalize these elements and we broadcast it all over the nightly news. We can put the controls back on our society that seems to be out of control.
The power dynamics that forged the war on drugs will now reverberate across 5 decades.
Sometimes people say that the war on drugs really wasn't about drugs, and they state that like that's news.
He's up in the corner.
It's only news to people who just haven't been paying attention.
Exactly.
Of course it wasn't about drugs.
There was a fraud. It was a political maneuvering that was designed to keep certain aspects of the culture under control.
All right, that's it. So that was just kind of added there just to illustrate a, kind of like what the progression has been since not only the passing of the Civil Rights Act, but also the passing away of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. Okay, what's next?
Let's go back to this. Go to that. What? Why does it keep replaying slides?
Always does it. It did this even before we went to. This isn't even an ABS thing. So King's death roiled national politics generationally. His assassination turned him into much more than a martyr. He became one of the founding fathers of post-war American democracy, a social movement leader whose memory reinforced both the grandeur and travails of the nation's racial history. Yet King's posthumous celebration in contemporary American popular culture remains incomplete. Don't tell that to Ben Shapiro. He is recognized as perhaps the nation's most famous advocate of nonviolence and celebrated as a prophet whose stirring example unleashed the racial progress that culminated in Barack Obama's presidency. He balanced his critique of America's complicity in promoting materialism, militarism, and racism with a defiant optimism about democracy's enormous potential to achieve a more hopeful and humane world. But the more incendiary of King's politics are still often ignored, discounted, or unmentioned. Don't tell that to Ben Shapiro. The radical King identified racism, poverty, and war as threats against the entire planet. But this aspect of his legacy remains sidelined because of the discomfort his words of fire continue to cause. So how do you think Ben Shapiro, how do you think that, compared to what Ben Shapiro was saying in that clip we watched in the beginning, how do you think this matches up to that?
Probably not great. If anything, it's kind of at opposite, ends, it's kind of contradictory.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just a very weird, I don't even know what's going on over there.
I don't know either. Like,
Steer, we have like a kind of a very deliberate aim of the streams where we like to go over books and things like that. If there's anything you want to say about like MLK or Malcolm X or maybe something along that, we can talk about it. But you're kind of like so far in left field that there's not even really anything that we can discuss appropriately. So let's go to the next one.
Okay. Recursion. Fucking nerd.
Dude, this guy's just like, please debate me, bro. Please.
Debate
You have
me.
to. Please. That's a logical fallacy. You can't say and that is a red herring fallacy.
You called me a nerd. That's an ad hominem.
That's a non sequitur. That is non sequitur. Fuck up. And I like to debate too, but this isn't really the appropriate time for it. Nor are you even bringing up anything about the content that we're discussing. Like you can't come in and just be like, communism bad. Debate me. It's like, dude,
Salty Commie, like we have mods in chat that, like, you know, we totally leave it up to their discretion, you know.
Salty Tommy, I am someone that pushes for, like, you know, a lot of, like, you know, not just like insta banning people that come in that want to kind of like disagree. And I think there's been times where it's been healthy and actually good pertaining to the specific conversation that we're having. And then this is just kind of like left, like, just not necessary.
I think we even put like I put something in channel points. It's just like,
generally, if chat gets upset with someone, we just tell them to get banned. Like, if they're that much of a nuisance, and like chat, if someone in chat like goes like, "This is super annoying," we just
wait, fuck, somebody redeemed that shit. When did they redeem it?
What do you mean redeemed?
All right, so fucking damn it. All right, so there's this thing called channel points, right? And I put 2 custom channel point like things in there, right? One of them is they get to debate you for 10 minutes if they spend like 2,000 channel points, and and that's it, right? And the other one was you know, I'll do like there's nothing to do with what we're.
If you set it up as a redemption, it doesn't matter what it has to do with. You better get that throat moving, boy.
What?
You better put that throat to work. It doesn't matter what it has to do with if you've set it as a redemption.
Hamburger, cheeseburger, Big Mac Whopper,
Oh, yeah. Very good. We're all having a good time.
What will you be willing to do for 27,000 points?
I don't even know. What does that even translate to? What does 27,000 points even do?
I don't even know, man.
What do the points do?
I'm gonna be honest. I've been on Twitch for like a year now. I still don't know what like a lot of this shit does. Is this a Peter?
All I know is I want them desperately. All right, so back to the content. In the popular imagination, Malcolm is the political sword of the black radicalism that found its stride during the heroic years of the civil rights era and fully flowered during the Black Power movement. King stands in contrast as the nonviolent guardian of a nation. His shield prevented a blood-soaked era from being more violent. Their respective worldviews antagonized, infuriated, and inspired each other. Little dialectic going on here. In many ways, Malcolm might best be considered Black America's prosecuting attorney, a political leader who condemned white institutions and citizens for historic and contemporary racial crimes. The sight of Malcolm regaling Harlem audiences, reporters, and television cameras with the era's boldest analysis of institutional racism, always laced with biting humor, remains an indelible image of the period. His sternly handsome face conjures up a space of myth and mourning. He forged personal intimacy with mass audience by boldly confronting America's brutal history of racial trauma, and his uncanny ability to recognize the revolutionary potential found in the distillation of Black pain proved transformative. Over time, he convinced large swaths of the Black community that the very source of their oppression, their Blackness, held the key to liberation. Malcolm believed in the intrinsic value of Black life, even when many African Americans did not. In the early days of the civil rights movement, this made him a man ahead of his time. After his death, his unyielding faith in the beauty of Black struggle made him an icon. So now we have a couple examples of this fiery charisma of Malcolm X, which I mean, I don't think I have consumed enough of like Malcolm X's spoken word, but here's just an example of it because these are so inspiring to me. So go ahead.
Let's just keep doing it like this, because this.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm sorry.
This is what you lust for.
In order for you and me to devise some kind of method or strategy to offset some of the events or a repetition of the events that have taken place here in Los Angeles recently, we have to go to the root. We have to go to the cause. Dealing with the condition itself is not enough. And it is because of our effort toward getting straight to the root that people oftentimes think we're dealing in hate.
You put on the captions?
We are oppressed. We are exploited. We are downtrodden. We are denied not only civil rights, but even human rights. So the only way we're going to get some of this oppression and exploitation away from us or aside from us is come together against the common enemy. Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such extent that you bleach to get like the white man? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose and the shape of your lips? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Who taught you to hate your own kind? Who taught you to hate the race that you belong to? So much so that you don't want to be around each other. No, before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate, you should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you? And I, for one, as a Muslim, believe that the white man is intelligent enough. If he were made to realize how black people really feel and how fed up we are without that old compromise and sweet talk. Stop sweet talking him. Tell him how you feel. Tell him what kind of hell you've been catching, and let him know that if he's not ready to clean his house up, if he's not ready to clean his house up, he shouldn't have a house. It should catch on fire and burn down.
Spitting flames. Malcolm spitting flames there. And I like how he even said it. He's like, you should catch on fire.
Is this where Jordan Peterson got that?
And burn down.
I mean, like, how comical would it be if that is where Jordan Peterson got it?
White people shouldn't have houses.
I mean, like, look.
Sam, look. It's not progress to take the knife out of the back by an inch or something like that, right?
Yeah, if the knife is in my back 6 inches, right? Like and you take it out 1, like I'm not beginning to heal until you remove the knife completely.
There's one more after this too. It's a shorter one, but just I couldn't pick one.
But I mean, like, we're not very far from that. I mean, most people can't afford a house these days, so the revenge of Shabazz, is upon us, Jacobians.
The revenge of Shabazz. Now, this is the ballot or the bullet. Now, you might have heard this. This is one of the more. This is the equivalent of like Malcolm X, of Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream." This is like Malcolm X's "I Have a Dream" equivalent of how famous this speech is. This is only an excerpt.
All right, are we playing the whole thing though?
Yeah.
All right, I'll be right back.
Cool.
African
Americans. Can you hit the captions before you go?
Or so-called Negro. One of the reasons that it is bad for us to continue to just refer to ourselves as so-called Negro, that's negative. When we say so-called Negro, that's pointing out what we aren't, but it isn't telling us what we are. We are African, and we happen to be in America. We're not American. We are people who formerly were Africans who were kidnapped and brought to America. Our forefathers weren't the Pilgrims.
We didn't land on Plymouth Rock. The rock was landed on us. We were brought here against our will. We were not brought here to be made citizens. We were not brought here to enjoy the constitutional gifts that they speak so beautifully about today. And because we weren't brought here to be made citizens today, now that we've become awakened to some degree and we begin to ask for those things which they say are supposedly for Americans, they look upon us with hostility and unfriendliness. So our unwanted presence, the fact that we are unwanted, is becoming magnified in all of America's preachments today. In the United Nations, you have poor nations and rich nations. They say that the most powerful bloc in the UN are the African Asian bloc. These are the poor nations. Yet they carry more weight in this political body than the nations do who have all the money. Why? Because no matter how wealthy America is, she only has one vote. No matter how wealthy Russia is, she only has one vote. Whereas all the poor nations in Africa who have just emerged into independence, they have each a vote too. And they stick together and are able to outmaneuver the rich nations. This is by having independence and the right to vote in the political world body, it has enabled the dark nations to band together and use the strength of their ballot to force the wealthy nations, which are the white nations, into giving more independence to other nations who are still under their jurisdiction. You and I have to look at this and understand this, that the ballot is as powerful as the bullet. Now, if you and I leave it up to the moderate Negro leaders, they'll be able to trick it up and make the world think that they passed something that doesn't really mean anything. So what you and I have got to do is get involved. You and I have to be right there breathing down their throat. Every time they look over their shoulder, we want them to see us. We want to make them pass the strongest civil rights bill they've ever passed. Because we know even after they pass it, they can't enforce it. In order to do this, we're starting a voters registration drive. We have to get everybody in Harlem registered. Not as Democrats or Republicans, but registered as independents.
Wow.
We're going to organize a corps of brothers and sisters who, after the city is mapped out, they won't leave one apartment house door not knocked on. There won't be a door in Harlem that will not have been knocked on to see that whatever black face lives behind that door is registered to vote by a certain time this year. Nobody will have an excuse not to be registered. We'll ask him, let us see your card. If you don't have the sense of responsibility to get registered, we'll move you out of town.
Wow, he was really hardcore into electoralism.
It's going to be the ballot or the bullet.
So yeah.
After we get our people registered, we can then organize that voting strength and channel it in the direction that will get immediate results for the benefit of our people. We can sweep our enemies right out of office, but we will not be able to do it sitting around talking about select and elect your own candidates.
Yeah, that is
I've been silent for the past 90 days because of
that's how you engage with electoralism. In my opinion. This isn't. We're done with YouTube unless you want to watch it.
Brothers and sisters, friends, I see some enemies.
Ian? Is there? Oh, okay.
No, that's what the press said.
Oh, okay.
What would I look like saying that I'm glad the president was killed?
Malcolm, this is your first public statement in that 90-day period, is it not?
First time I opened up my mouth in 90 days. That's why I'm talking so fast and so hearty.
You feel, however, that we're making progress in this country and worldwide?
No. I will never say that progress is being made. If you stick a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 6 inches, there's no progress. If you pull it all the way out, that's not progress. The progress is healing the wound that the blow made. They won't even admit the knife is there.
Mm-hmm.
Classic stuff. Classic stuff. All right. Oh no. The specter of Ben Shapiro. All right. Let's keep it moving here.
The opportunity to avoid fucking around, therefore finding out. Talked about radical solutions, but he himself kept clear of such actions and people likely to commit them. He has spent enough time in jail.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a certain way to be a political advocate, and just based on the speeches that we listen to here, it seems like there's an underlying like threat of revolution, but it seems that the primary is like, we're gonna do this the right way, but if you don't give it to us the right way, there's going to be hell to pay. That's why it's the ballot or the bullet. So I mean, like, he might not have been like loading up Kalashnikovs in some fucking warehouse somewhere, but that was not Malcolm X's gift. His gift was as an orator. So I mean, and I don't think he ever explicitly called for that type of violence, but it did seem as though he was saying, like, we'll do this your way. We want the Civil Rights Act to pass. We want you to enforce it. We want these type of remunerations, but if you don't, there will be hell to pay, and we're willing to take it there if you won't bring it to us.
I mean, I think the other thing to remember is that, like, a lot of times, right, electoralism is the primary path that most of these movements try to take or attempt to take. Castro tried electoralism. Obviously, like, blacks throughout the South tried electoralism, and there was literally, like, after the Civil War, during Reconstruction, that they call it the abandonment, right? Because all of the people that they had elected after the Civil War, all of the black, mayors and governors and whatnot, right? They were all ousted out of office, like, within, 5-10 years after the Civil War?
Right.
So it's time, and it's like a cycle of, like, electoralism. We'll try militancy,
Yeah, I think that every revolution that is violent comes as a secondary, or at least not a primary method of changing a society. I think revolution only comes prior to some kind of like severe repression, and that repression entails an inability to change it through like the usual mechanisms of society. If it were, then there would be no need for such a thing.
Well, I mean, like, I don't know if Malcolm would have never chosen the bullet, right? It's not as if, like, you say it yourself that, like,
it's all speculation.
He had spent enough time in jail, but yeah, it's all hypothetical.
Yeah, you
but,
can
like,
speculate
we don't know.
and I guess no one can prove your hypothesis wrong. But I mean,
Right.
I could literally just say that I believe differently. So let's go to the next thing.
African Americans.
God damn it. All right. You want to do this one?
Sure. Dreams. God. Beyond dreams and nightmares. Malcolm's formal political activism outside of prison, which spanned the years 1952 to 1965, God damn, overlapped with King's, which occurred from 1955 to
Malcolm X was
1968.
Malcolm X was dead when the Black Panther Party was formed.
Yeah.
So.
While Malcolm embraced political activism as a vocation 3 years before King, his time as a national figure arrived in 1959, 3 years after King's emergence as the public face of the epic Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott. The mythology presents King as a hopeful optimist whose soaring "I Have a Dream" speech at the March on Washington is contrasted with Malcolm X's unapologetic declaration that black citizenship would only be achieved through the ballot or the bullet. Contemporary depictions of both men have left us with indelible icons more than flesh and blood human beings. Too often, our complex and messy national civil rights history has been related to the general public like a children's bedtime story, one that requires, indeed mandates, a happy ending. Civil rights are now largely recognized as a political and moral good. The movement's demands for citizenship and equality retrospectively considered unassailable parts of our democracy. The era's combative militancy, even among the advocates of nonviolence, is obscured in this telling, or at times forgotten. The real Malcolm and Martin offer a more complex portrait of the era. Braiding their political lives together provides a new, difficult, and challenging, but ultimately more satisfying understanding of these men and the times they shaped, which is exactly why we have chosen to read this book, especially, for the time, that we're going to be reading it. Both these figures have been turned into non-human beings, two-dimensional characters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is just such an eloquent way of breaking down that dynamic with just it's this children's bedtime story that mandates a happy ending. When in reality, the truth of the matter is more troubling, but also more satisfying when we can really get into that. And you're gonna probably be able to surf through YouTube or whatever you may watch and find many, many more mainstream channels offering a far more liberal or far more conservative interpretation of these events. And that's why we want to be here throughout this month to be able to counteract that with something that I believe is a little bit more truthful and a little more inspiring.
Right. And I think that just like with, the Counter-Revolution of 1776, this is a fairly recent book, right? And this is probably going to be used information or records that not a lot of other people have laid eyes on or written about, right? So if while we're reading this you hear something, right, from out of this book, right, that you've never heard before, it's because new information can be found.
Yes, absolutely. All right, let's bring it on to the next slide. Jump back one more.
God damn it.
Yes, okay. Malcolm and Martin, in life and death, retained sharp differences. They disagreed on the role of violence in organizing a political revolution. Early on, they diverged on the source of racial oppression, with Malcolm focused on systemic patterns of racial injustice, and King attuned to racism's invidious damage on hearts, minds, and souls. Cultivated in the Black Christian church, King deployed religious language in political sermons that elevated the struggle for racial justice into the moral issue of the 20th century. Malcolm found his religious faith in two distinct forms of Islam that gave him the personal strength to match his political convictions. He embraced the language of the street speakers, from learned griots. Remember we just talked about griots the other day, like the storytellers from Africa?
Yes.
From learned I think it's griots.
I think it's griot.
Griots. And intellectuals.
Oh, yeah, griots, yeah.
Yeah. And intellectuals to corner store hustlers to offer an unvarnished portrait of institutional racism, white supremacy, and racial violence. But a binary understanding of Malcolm and Martin is incomplete. Two-dimensional characterizations of their activism, relationship, and influence obscure how the substantive differences between them were often complementary. It underestimates the way they influenced one another, and it shortchanges the political radicalism always inherent in each, even when they seem to be reformist or reactionary. This book examines the political lives of two social movement leaders who assumed divergent but crucially similar roles. Over time, each persuaded the other to become more like himself. Re-examining Malcolm and Martin alongside each other highlights the debt contemporary racial justice struggles owe them both.
Yeah, exactly. Less fire and ice, more yin and yang. There's more... They're more similar, especially by the end of their lives, than the difference that contemporary pop culture tries to paint them as.
Correct. 100%. That is what we're getting at here. So we're going to get into something interesting here. Go on to the next one, and you can read this next one.
All right. Malcolm and Martin were considered two of the most dangerous activists of their generation. A wide range of politicians, including presidents, Justice Department officials, most notably FBI Director J. Edgar fucking Hoover, and police and intelligence agencies marked them as subversives.
We need like an alert or something like that. Or like anytime a book we're reading actually mentions the word subversive, because it's happened multiple times in just the few books that we've read. That's something that we're gonna have to develop, is some kind of like a alert or something like that.
Yeah, no, we'll figure it out. We'll get it.
Roll credits.
We need to get like a I need to get like a stream deck so I can just hit it every time, like a fucking radio jockey.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Record scratch. Capable of fomenting civil unrest and racial disorder, which is like, it just makes you think like, well, what is order then?
I was just about to say that if they're fomenting disorder, what is it that we presently have?
Right.
What does exist? What is the status quo if what they are bringing is disorder?
Right. FBI agents placed illegal wiretap surveillances on King, courtesy of the sitting attorney general, garnering compromising information that threatened to derail him and the movement. Malcolm attracted both federal surveillance and a branch of the New York Police Department, the Bureau of Special Services, which served as the NYPD's version of the secret police and tracked him from the early years of the Cold War until his death. So, yeah, that's another thing. This is before the NSA, right? This is before 9/11. Like back when like you technically needed to have like, you know, a order of a judge to do this.
Right. So go on to the next slide. We have a little bit of a documentation that I pulled out of this book. This book is the COINTELPRO papers. Is it pronounced COINTEL or COINTELPRO?
It's COINTELPRO, isn't it?
I don't know. I say COINTELPRO like
why?
Like a pleb. I don't know. I mostly read it.
Well, I mean, it's
COINTELPRO.
What does COINTELPRO mean?
It's an FBI program.
I mean, like no, it's like it's counter.
Yeah, I get it. I know what each individual.
So technically, it would be COINTELPRO.
Sure, fine. Then you can say it like that. But this is a cool book. It's a lot of the documents from the FBI's secret war against dissent in the United States, and it has specific parts of this about Martin Luther King and Black liberation.
Well, now I can't stop imagining, like, you know, an hour-long stream where the both of us just keep referring to it as COINTELPRO.
So this is a letter from one of the head of COINTELPRO. Personally, I believe in the light of King's powerful demagogic speech yesterday. Do you know which powerful demagogic speech they are referring to?
Is it the ballot or the bullet?
No, this is about Martin Luther King.
Oh, Martin Luther King. Don't tell me it was the I Have a Dream one.
It was I Have a Dream.
Get the fuck out of here.
August 30th, 1963. This is 2 days after he gave the I Have a Dream speech. So for anybody that's curious, what they're referring to in this is I Have a Dream by Martin Luther King, which became the comforting anthem of liberalism in years to come. So personally, I believe in the light of King's powerful demagogic speech yesterday. He stands head and shoulders over all the Negro leaders put together when it comes to influencing great masses of Negroes. We must mark him now, if we have not done so before, as the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation from the standpoint of communism, the Negro and national security. So there's the full document over there where I got that from. But so this is in 1963, 2 days after I Have a Dream. And they're calling that the FBI is calling Martin Luther King the most dangerous Negro in the United States.
Not to mention, like, that's like the I Have a Dream speech is like his most optimistic.
Exactly. And most mainstream palatable speech that he's ever given.
Because like, you know, his later speeches, he's just like, I was wrong.
Yeah, so this is just a little bit. There's also, I didn't include it in here. The language is pretty gross. There's actually a suicide note that, I don't know if you heard about this, but there's like a FBI circulated suicide note that went out to him urging, not a suicide note, but like urging him to commit suicide. Have you
Oh
heard
yeah,
about
no,
that?
I've heard that one. Yeah.
Like it was pretty much blackmailing him and being like, kill yourself or else we're going to expose you.
Oh wow. He's a communist.
That's the funniest thing. Like, because there's also like a Steven Crowder video where they like go like, "Oh, the things you didn't know about Martin Luther King." And
That
one of
is
them
the
is
most
that
atrocious video I have ever fucking seen.
Right. I was gonna try to edit something together for the stream, but I just didn't have enough time to do all that. But like, it's so funny watching like the different conservative perspectives, where like one half of the conservative aisle is just attempting to like, yeah, I know he wanted economic redistributive policies, and I know he was against the Vietnam War and all this, but like these other things were really good, and like, but we don't like these other things. Whereas like Steven Crowder just takes like the defame him. He's a communist. Therefore, we'll just write off Martin Luther King. Who cares what it optically looks like?
It's like not. I'm gonna use this like fucking incredibly offensive like phrase, even though crack cocaine had not even been invented yet.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. That dude is a piece of shit.
Yeah. Fuck him. He's
So
gonna
now we
have
move on.
a lot of work to do should he decide to come out and try and like rebrand as like a lib.
Yeah. So now we have here, this is regarding Malcolm X, which I just came across this while I was reading through this yesterday. Essentially, FBI in some sense taking credit for like at least stoking the flames that caused Malcolm X to be murdered. This is the words of Ward Churchill that I actually quoted out of the book too, because I didn't want to take my own spin on this because I don't know much about it. But by the point of Malcolm's assassination during a speech in Harlem on the night of February 14th, 1965, the FBI had compiled at least 2,300 pages of material on the victim in just one of its files on him. So that just goes to show like how deep the FBI were also investigating Malcolm X. The Nation of Islam and the OAAU. Malcolm X was supposedly murdered by former colleagues in the Nation of Islam as a result of the faction fighting, which had led to his splitting away from that movement and their natural wrath at his establishment of a competing entity. However, as the accompanying January 22nd, 1969 memo from the SAC Chicago, the director made clear that the Nation of Islam factionism at issue didn't just happen. Rather, it had been developed by deliberate bureau actions through LOD infiltration and the sparking of acrimonious debates within the organization, rumor mongering, and other tactics designed to foster internal disputes, which were always the standard fare of COINTELPRO. The Chicago SAC, Marlon Johnson, who would shortly oversee the assassinations of Illinois Black Panther Party leaders Fred Hampton and Mark Clark, make it quite obvious that he views the murder of Malcolm X as something of a model for successful counterintelligence operations.
Yeah, what the hell is it? This is exactly what they did with the Black Panthers, where like they would sow like, division between like, different chapters of the Black Panther Party, or with the Black Panther Party and other organizations or other gangs that like, they had no fucking problem with.
Yep, exactly. So, while maybe, there isn't, a smoking gun that leads directly to the FBI, you can see that they were very happy with the seeds of dissent that they sowed around the Nation of Islam and associated groups to cause this type of factionalism that ended in, one of the greatest, minds in the civil rights movement to be murdered.
I love Seb's Dev's comment that, like, at least yours is from the FBI, mine are the CIA. You get the international brand.
Yeah, you get the international brand. Yeah, this is the domestic CIA. All right, let's keep it moving here.
All right, you want me to read this one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Martin Luther King Jr.'s most enduring legacy is the commitment to and introduction of what I call radical black citizenship. For King, radical black citizenship encompassed more than just voting rights. Urban violence in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Watts erupted in August 1965, less than a week after the passage of the Voting Rights Act. The result of an encounter between a local resident and police. The conflict escalated into a sprawling citywide riot that shocked and frightened the nation. After the urban rebellion of Watts, King came to realize that in addition to voting, true citizenship included a good job, living wage, decent housing, quality education, health care, and nourishment. That is to say that citizenship meant, according to King, more than the absence of the negative structures of oppression he spent his life fighting. His legacy of radical black citizenship, one that continues in the work of Moral Mondays, March for Our Lives, #MeToo, and Black Lives Matter, encompassed his revolutionary life, fearless love of the poor, and uncompromising stance against war and violence, all of which offers hope for a better future. His life also provided a framework for the resistance against rising levels of inhumanity, racism, and injustice that he would find all too familiar today. Thank you for subscribing, Goki.
Is that a subscription or is that a follow?
I can't tell. Hang on. I need to make the thing different.
Pretty sure that's a follow.
Also, we should be getting like audio alerts letting us like, know that they did, but
yeah, so only a follow.
Only a follow. Whatever.
But glad you're here.
Glad you followed. Hopefully, you'll find this material very interesting. We're going over the book. Where's my
Sam's giving them shout out, so we know
across the screen.
Fam.
Whatever. We're going over The Sword and the Shield by Mr. Josph. Sorry, I'm like very hypoglycemic right now and I can't think straight.
Oh, no, the hyperglycemia is setting in. What'd you eat?
Nothing.
Oh, is that that's what causes that?
I'm probably going to be eating like on stream in like 5 minutes.
It's all right. It's no problem. Okay, so real quick before we get into this, we can look at, can you go back for 1 second?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I also wanted to say something about this fucking thing too. So, who here knows about the 10-point program for the Black Panther Party of self-defense?
I do.
I would hope you do. So, let me actually see if I can look that up real quick.
I can get it from a book downstairs. Bayard, Rustin, how did you get back here?
Sick. All right. We want freedom. We want power to determine the destiny of our clan. We believe black people are oppressed, determine destinies in our community selves for controlling our institutions that exist in our communities, employment for our people, jobs. We want an end to the robbery by the capitalist of our black oppressed communities. As robs us, we are demanding restitution, right? Decent housing, fit for the shelter of human beings, so that there's housing. We want education for our people. There's education, health care. We want an end to police brutality, murder, black people present inside the United States, right? So this is like an end of policing in their communities by people that don't live there or don't represent their community. We want an immediate end to all wars of aggression. That sounds pretty MLK. We want freedom for all black poor oppressed people now held in U.S. federal. Oh, so that's prison abolition right there. We want land, bread, housing, education, clothing, justice, peace, and people's community control of modern technology. Huh. So sounds pretty
not
similar.
Not that much different than what Dr. King was asking for, was it?
No, not really.
Is that the point you were making? That's what I thought you were going with that.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. Is that no matter what, right, to address all of these things, right, you will come down to things that revolve around not just like community control, but poverty alleviation.
Correct. And also, we need to look at the trajectory that led Dr. King down this path, right? Because we have, if you look here, that urban violence in Los Angeles, Watts, erupted in August 1965. This is a week after the passage of the Voting Rights Act. So you know what I mean? Like, just like this says, simply removing the negative structures of oppression were not sufficient in progressing, these black communities forward. This needed not just negative attention, but also needed positive contributions. So we're gonna go more into that in a little bit, but let's go. We have his speech here of go forward one. We have his speech where he went to Watts and spoke, where he kind of starts to touch on more of these economic issues. Yeah, Subzev. It's really revolutionary sociology. I think you can fast forward it a little bit. There's like this weird silent part in the beginning. Not just before he starts talking.
You don't want all this footage of him coming off the plane?
Sure, go ahead. Let it rip. So, and again, this is a issue of like police antagonism that ended up causing the riot in Watts, which is one of the more famous riots in American history.
I have come to Los Angeles at the invitation of a number of concerned individuals and major organizations that have been, like myself, deeply involved in the struggle for civil rights and human dignity. Let me say, first of all, that I profoundly deplore the events that have occurred in Los Angeles in these last few tragic days.
Welcome, Xenogender Discourse.
Said on many occasions,
hey, what's up?
That violence is not the answer to social conflict, whether it is engaged in by white people in Alabama or by Negroes in Los Angeles. Violence is always regrettable.
You would be so lucky.
Come on, man.
Sam, you can handle that one. There ain't no wrestling with that one.
Can I pull this up? Nah, it's not gonna let me.
What were you trying to pull up?
There we go. Thanks, Sam.
Good work, Sam. Sam's been dying. Sam's just been waiting to fucking...
Thank you for your service, Sam.
Assassinate someone.
Let's rewind this a little bit, because that was a little derailing.
These last few tragic days that have been, like myself, deeply...
Oh, that's a good point, Grave Wax.
Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I have come to Los Angeles at
True, I didn't even think of that, Grave Wax.
Concerned individuals and major organizations that have been
welcome, Glass Bike Line.
Involved in the struggle for civil rights.
There's Rustin Bayard right behind him.
Let me say first of all that I profoundly deplore the events that have occurred in Los Angeles in these last few tragic days. I believe and have said on many occasions that violence is not the answer to social conflict, whether it is engaged in by white people in Alabama or by Negroes in Los Angeles.
He's got a cigarette in the background.
In this period, in light of the tremendous nonviolent sacrifices that both Negro and white people together have endured to bring justice to all men. But it is equally clear, as President Johnson pointed out yesterday, that it is a job of all Americans to right the wrongs from which such violence and disorder spring. The criminal responses which led to the tragic outbreaks of violence in Los Angeles are environmental and not racial. The economic deprivation, social isolation, inadequate housing, and general despair of thousands of Negroes teeming in northern and western ghettos are the ready seeds which give birth to tragic expressions of violence. By acts of commission and omission, none of us in this great country...
There was like ads that were like, yeah, you know what the healthiest brand of cigarette are? Camel. Smoke Camel. They're the healthiest cigarettes.
Our share of responsibility for these past days of anguish.
I should like to state in quite more specific terms why I make this journey in the interest of reconciliation and future cooperation between the races. First, I have come to minister to the thousands of innocent Negro people who have done no wrong, who have thought in any way to use violence, yet whose community has been disrupted by rioting, the destruction of institutions they daily need.
Doctors choose camel.
Many of whom have lost their work. This has been for them not merely the hardship springing from the disruption of their physical community. It has been a spiritual disaster.
I still vape because I literally would go right back to smoking without it.
Secondly, I have come to minister to the small
You're on that methadone, that tobacco methadone.
those who have been involved in the rioting. Our Christian effort must be to redeem them and to leave no stone unturned despite their guilt, to help them find a useful place in building a good society in which they can share as equals. In this connection, I shall, as a first step, seek to visit with them in prison and to urge officials to find ways for them to help reconstruct the damage they have done. Thirdly, I would like to confer with the many segments of the white community that have been the staunch allies of the Negro people in our struggle. Surely, if millions of Negroes across the country are dismayed, deeply hurt, and bewildered by these past few days, it stands to reason that our white friends are also. The strength of the Negro-White Alliance for Justice will be maintained only if we are in constant dialogue, understanding past mistakes, evolving new programs, and providing ways and means to avert any such recurrence of violence. Fourthly, I would like to work with the local leadership of Los Angeles in proposing programs for the eradication of those problems relating to housing, schools, jobs, and police behavior that were directly or
He's condemning the violence, but also he's saying we need this systemic solution to this. That I would rather help getting education, housing, and police, reducing police brutality, which are causing this.
Right.
On the role and responsibility of governments, and to evaluate with them a program that will eliminate such future occurrences in Los Angeles or in any other city of our nation. And I'd like to say two things finally. And that is that I have come to listen and to talk with the broad spectrum of leadership.
I don't know about all that, Monsieur.
Yeah, might be a little bit ambitious.
And I need to do that before making any value judgment.
That sounds more like it.
There you go. Now we're getting somewhere. It's a different person.
Made by public officials.
And if he was white.
Yeah. All right. Just a completely different person.
Did not do their job. I think we have to see that these riots grew out of many things, particularly the explosion of accumulated frustrations that have been developing across the years as a result of the long night of poverty and economic insecurity. I think Los Angeles is fortunate to have very able leadership in the Negro community, and no Negro leader at the moment when these explosions had become so great could have appealed to reason, because a riot does not listen, a mob does not listen to reason. So I think that the statements that gave the impression on no, it's my feeling, as I said earlier, that this was a sort of blind and misguided revolt against a society and authority on the part of people who, for many reasons, feel alienated from their nation, from their families in many instances, and from themselves. And out of self-hatred, self-rejection, frustration, seething desperation, because of their plight, they unconsciously and consciously turned to these methods. I don't think there was any individual or group that organized a riot.
We went through like the most important part of this video here.
Was told that they do not recognize you as a leader
You hear me?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Yeah, we got through the points that we needed to. We can close this out now.
Although I am kind of interested in this part.
Okay, good.
I hope I can talk to some of these groups. There's no doubt about the fact and no secret that there are Negroes in the United States who do not believe in nonviolence. They made it clear in public statements and in other channels. My feeling is that the vast majority of Negroes in the United States believe in nonviolence as a basic tactic for social change. I don't mean they believe in it as I do, as a way of life or as a creed, and I don't feel that they all feel that the love ethic must be the regulating ideal in this period of transition, but at least they believe in nonviolence as the best strategy.
Cycrum.
And from a pragmatic point of view, they are willing to.
Oh no, they're already banned, or they're not in chat anymore.
Minority in the Negro community, and I can assure you that those who rioted did not represent the thinking or the methods of the vast majority of the 500,000 Negroes in Los Angeles, California.
All right, whatever. Let's move on.
All right.
So, chat, because of just like, you know, the title or something, I don't know. Maybe all it takes is one, right? I guess I could turn on shield mode. I don't know if that would change anything for any of you. Why is this thing not going? There we go.
Because it only says the sword and the shield, and I think sword and shield are misspelled.
Did I misspell it? Are you serious?
I think the sword is spelled with an I, and I don't think shield has a D on it.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, and I don't think it was even that. I think it was maybe if you just saw us like pop up.
Yeah, I'm doing great. Doing great, everybody.
I thought it was spelled that way to avoid trolls. Like, yeah, like.
I mean, you would think.
That's the troll deterrent right there. Oh shit. We are off to a fucking fiery start for our first day with OBGYN. What is it called?
Fucking great. OBS.
OBS. With the OBS. We have like the most absolutely toxic trolls that have ever graced this stream.
Yeah, this is like
dude, you know what's really sad is that like the communist trolls, like the MLK trolls are worse than the communist trolls. The communist trolls like at least like just come in and say like Vevazula 100 billion dead. Like they're not like outright racist and anti-Semites.
How the fuck did I edit this last time? I know I did it like...
This is fucking amazing.
Jesus Christ.
They're trying to silence us. They don't want to hear the truth. Cycrum said that they would also help us out with some OBS stuff. Is it still up? Just leave it for now. It doesn't matter.
I'm trying today, everybody. All right.
You're right, Paul Becoming. I'm just talking about the difference. So I'm just talking about the marked difference between when we have communism or something like that in the title, like the people that come and troll the chat, versus just having a picture of MLK on the screen. It's just like so much more toxic so quickly. I would imagine that Venn diagram is the sides of it are pretty slim. Pokemon Sword and Shield. Sword and Shield.
Son of a bitch.
Oh shit. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna read this one
just so that keep going.
Okay. So Malcolm X too often remains primarily remembered for what he was not, Martin Luther King. I think that's such an incredible summarization of Malcolm X's mainstream legacy. Malcolm X too often remains primarily remembered for what he was not, Martin Luther King Jr. But in reality, Malcolm was a brilliant activist, organizer, and intellectual whose life reminds us of the possibilities of a liberated future in America and beyond. His unapologetic... Oh, dude. You, okay. His unapologetic insistency on what I call radical black dignity marked him as a prophetic visionary in the eyes of a global black community and as a dangerous subversive to the American government. Malcolm defined black dignity as a collective goal that required bold leadership and the ability to confront America's tragic racial history. The embrace of a black identity, history, and beauty served as the first step in organizing a revolutionary movement for political self-determination. Empowered by Africa's presence on the world stage and the courage of ordinary black people in insisting that their lives, traditions, culture, and histories mattered in the face of archipelagos of racial terror that stretched from Brooklyn to Birmingham to Bandung. Malcolm's searing description of the pain, trauma, and violence of America's racial wilderness became the crux of his political debate with King. King fully acknowledged the panoramic nature of racial oppression, in essence, the existence of the American racial wilderness, only after Malcolm's death, which means that Malcolm's death, his assassination, had a huge impact on Martin Luther King in terms of how he viewed the political and social climate of the United States. Oh, well, we got to go. Yeah. All right. You can go to the next one. This is a great little clip here by Malcolm. You guys are gonna love this one. Can you put the captions on, please? Yep. Very good. I don't know. Can you pause it real quick?
I don't know, but Can
you pause it real quick?
Yeah.
So, how many people in chat have seen that Bad Mouse video, where they talk about like Tanky's like misappropriating Malcolm X or something like that? I thought that was like a weird comment from him about that situation, and I'm not saying that like Malcolm was like a member of a communist party or anything like that.
He wasn't.
What?
He was not.
He was not. But this quote and his you know, let's see, his you know, his associations with Fidel, his praise of Mao, you know, and then this quote. Let's play out this quote.
Flexible. All right, the gentleman back there.
I would like to know, is there any organization that isn't flexible?
What's the question? Is there any
organization that isn't
is there any organization that isn't flexible?
In other words, what organization is doing something to bring back what we are really here on this earth for?
Both of those questions are still combined, and I know my brother here will get. But I would like to, as was stated earlier, all of the countries that are emerging today from under the shackles of colonialism are turning towards socialism. I don't think it's an accident. Most of the countries who were colonial powers were capitalist countries, and the last a bulwark of capitalism today is America. And it's impossible for a white person to believe in capitalism and not believe in racism. When you find one, yes, you can't have capitalism without racism. And if you find one, and you happen to get that person into a conversation, and they have a philosophy that makes you sure that they don't have this racism in their outlook, usually they're socialists. Or their political philosophy is socialism.
That's it. So kind of, you know, interesting, you know, economic outlooks by Brother Malcolm X.
So while he may not have been like, you know, an avowed communist or Marxist Leninist or anything like that,
you all right?
Yeah, no, everything's fine, especially now. So while he may not have been any of those things, right? he was still what's the word, like sympathetic to those movements.
Well, not even sympathetic. It seems like he's almost like, the classic quote from him is like, "You show me a capitalist, I'll show you a bloodsucker."
Right.
You know what I mean? And, from what he just said right here, in no uncertain terms, he said, who are the colonizing countries? They're the capitalists. Who are the ones that are fighting against colonialism? They're socialists. You see racism, you can't have capitalism without racism. And
Right.
then he says, you meet any of these people that are non-racist, you're going to find out that they're socialists or they have a socialist political philosophy, is what he says. So, a lot of, kind of like salty commie saying with semantics. It's kind of like splitting hairs to be like, well, actually, he's not literally a communist or something like that. It's like, dude, who cares? Like, if he doesn't like name himself with the proper title, it's kind of obvious with his associations with Fidel, with what he's saying here, with his support for the Bandung, the Bandung non-aligned movements, for his support for Mao. I mean, it's kind of.
Well, it's like people that want to give, like, Maduro shit for, like, not being, like, an avowed communist or anything. Like, you work with what you got.
Yeah, well, and I'm less concerned with, like, a nominal title of communist than I am with, like, those who are, the revolution that feeds the children gets my support.
Right, exactly.
Well, to quote the great Peretti. So let's move forward one here.
Gentleman back there with the paper in his hand, man.
Yeah, you gotta move forward.
Oh, son of a bitch. There we go. Thank you.
This word has fallen. So, America's civil rights struggle in the 20th century, now remembered as a virtually seamless march towards racial progress, unfolded in violent fits and starts. So this is another thing that needs to be understood here. That what is looked at now in retrospect is just the seamless march towards racial progress. What's happening?
Sorry.
Okay. Unfolded in violent fits and starts. This is such a cool timeline, or not really a cool timeline, but just an enlightening timeline for how these events really happened. So the signal of events of the heroic period was 1954's Brown versus the Board of Education. Then just a year later, you had the lynching of Emmett Till. Then that same year, you had the Montgomery bus boycott. Then in 1957, you had the Little Rock Central High School crisis. Then in 1960, you had sit-in demonstrations that spurred the creation of SNCC, SNCC, and the 1961 Freedom Rides. James Meredith's 1962 integration of the University of Mississippi, Birmingham, Alabama's racial crisis in the spring of '63, followed by the March on Washington, where King gave his "I Have a Dream" speech. Then after that, the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing and the Kennedy assassination. Then the Freedom Summer and the passage of the 1964 Civil Rights Act. Then Bloody Sunday in Selma and the passage of the Voting Rights Act continue to frame the popular conception of the era at the expense of a more nuanced and historically complex understanding. The limited vision of the period constrains our ability to appreciate the personal and political contradictions that enveloped Malcolm X and Martin Luther King during this era. So it's like we have like this tumultuous period of like some progressions and then also just like brutal setbacks in this, you know what I mean? Like there was not just a light switch that said, hey, we're not racist anymore in this country.
That light switch was never turned off.
Right. So, and I think that this really paints that picture very well, that like this was not just like a seamless march of progress. This has been a tooth and nail fight for these types of policies.
Not even that, but like
policies, but social change.
And the amount of people that were murdered and brutalized along the way.
Yep. Okay. Conventional narratives of the civil rights era's heroic period also obscure discussion of black people residing on the lower frequencies of American political life. Malcolm X thrived in these spaces, cultivating prisoners, the formerly incarcerated, and the black working class in an effort to reach a mass audience of disenfranchised Negroes. Malcolm X helped to internationalize black political radicalism. He defined the struggle for black citizenship through global events that made him Black America's unofficial prime minister. Black radicals, aware of the racial conflicts that made national headlines, looked toward anti-colonial struggles in the Third World for inspiration of their own domestic racial justice struggles. Malcolm toured African nation states, Middle East capitals, and European cities in an effort to link domestic black politics to the larger world of anti-colonial and third world liberation movements. He engaged in international affairs from the start of his career and not, as is popular imagined, during his final year. These events abroad, which paralleled and at times intersected with the mainstream civil rights demonstrations, remained largely hidden from the public. Understanding the ways in which Malcolm and Martin both shaped and were shaped by local, domestic, and global currents of the civil rights and black power movements offers us a better appreciation of the movements and their legacies.
Psychrum, it will be. Yeah, I fear the rise of Ron DeSantis and others like him, the progress of the civil rights movement will be mostly reversed in the coming years. Yeah, no, it's going to be.
Yeah, this dude just banned like AP Black History out of like high school curriculums, right?
Yeah, not even that, but like, something about like books and shit will like land you in prison. And they have this like weird vague law where it's like anything that like modifies your appearance or something, like, that'll also give you like, jail time.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty psychotic and regressive. Glad I got out of Florida. All right, let's hit the next slide.
You want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead, unless you're eating.
Or I'll eat in a second. It's kind of hot.
All right, go ahead.
Malcolm's most profound influence on the civil rights era after his death came from the most unexpected place. Martin Luther King Jr.'s political activism following the passage of the 1965 Voting Rights Act directly reflects the influence of Malcolm X and the Black Power radicals. During the last 3 years of his life, King evolved from a national political mobilizer on friendly personal terms with the American presidents into a revolutionary. King's travails in America's searing political battlefield during these years and overwhelmingly overlooked, the nation's collective gaze is instead on the triumphant passage of the civil rights and voting rights legislation. But King's August 1965 visit to Los Angeles in the wake of the rebellion stirred in him the seeds of revolutionary discontent. His April 4th, 1967 Riverside Church speech in New York City braided racial injustice, economic inequality, and the Vietnam War into a brilliant critique of American empire, institutional racism, and violence. A year later, in Memphis, Tennessee, King found his reputation among the white Americans in decline as he recruited a multiracial army of the poor to come to Washington and demand radical legislation that would provide a living wage, guaranteed income, and an end to poverty in the world's richest nation. The revolutionary king who pushed America to become a redistributive social democracy that embraced racial justice and black citizenship is largely missing from our national understanding of that era.
And we have an excerpt from that speech. For those of you that don't know, this is the speech, I believe it's called Beyond Vietnam.
This is the one that Vietnam. Yeah, this is the one that made him like what is it? Who was president at the time? Johnson, right?
Yes.
After this speech, Johnson and every politician wouldn't touch him, backed away from him.
We have some interesting stats coming up as well, so we'll talk about that in just a moment. So pause this real quick, just before you get started. Note the progression, because we're not trying to paint Dr. King in broad strokes, that he was always this or always that. This is like a brilliant thinker who amended his beliefs and policies and strategies over years of, being one of the phases of the civil rights movement. So as the author is stating, you know what I mean? What Martin Luther King said in the 50s is not necessarily what he was saying in the late 60s. As Vietnam's happening, as even the civil rights passes, but he still sees that there's still so much to be done in black communities. Martin Luther King did not simply sit back and say, we did it. After that was passed in 1964, he started vigorously attacking other issues and noting Malcolm X has just got murdered. There's still riots in Watts. Police are still brutality. My people are still poor. And then then with the war in Vietnam culminates into this type of rhetoric. So go ahead and play it.
The time has come for America to hear the truth about this tragic war. Now, I've chosen to preach about the war in Vietnam today because I agree with Dante that the hottest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a period of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. There comes a time when silence is betrayal. Even when pressed by the demands of inner truth, men do not easily assume the task of opposing their government's policy, especially in time of war. Now, of course, one of the difficulties in speaking out today grows out of the fact that there are those who are seeking to equate dissent with disloyalty. It's a dark day in our nation when high-level authorities will seek to use every method to silence dissent. There is at the outset a very obvious and almost facile connection between the war in Vietnam and the struggle I and others have been waging in America, of a society gone mad on war. And I knew that America would never invest the necessary funds or energies in rehabilitation of its poor so long as adventures like Vietnam continue to draw men and skills and money like some demonic destructive suction tube. And you may not know it, my friends, but it is estimated that we spend $500,000 to kill each enemy soldier, while we spend only $53 for each person classified as poor. And much of that $53 goes for salaries to people who are not poor. So I was increasingly compelled to see the war as an enemy of the poor and attack it as such. Perhaps a more tragic recognition of reality took place when it became clear to me that the war was doing far more than devastating the hopes of the poor at home. It was sending their sons and their brothers and their husbands to fight and die in extraordinarily high proportions relative to the rest of the population. We were taking the black young men who had been crippled by society and sending them 8,000 miles away to guarantee liberties in Southeast Asia, which they had not found in Southwest Georgia and East Holland. So we have been repeatedly faced with the cruel irony of watching Negro and white boys on TV screens as they kill and die together for a nation that has been unable to seat them together in the same schoolroom. And I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. There's something strangely inconsistent about a nation and a press that will praise you when you say be nonviolent toward Jim Clark, but will curse and damn you when you say be nonviolent toward little brown Vietnamese children. There will be no meaningful solution.
For anybody that doesn't know, Jim Clark, he says, you praise me for nonviolence against Jim Clark, but you won't extend but you'll decry me if I support nonviolence against little Vietnamese children. Jim Clark was sheriff of the Dallas County, Alabama, United States from 1955 to 1966. He was one of the officials responsible for the violent arrest of civil rights protesters during the Selma to Montgomery marches in 1965, and is remembered as a racist whose brutal tactics included using cattle prods against unarmed civil rights supporters. So, I mean, that one might go by. It went by me. So, like, I brought that up just so that we all have the context of what just talking about that hypocritical nature of this nation that's like, yes, Dr. King, preach the nonviolence, tell them in the ghettos that they can't riot and all this, but then when he starts to say end the war in Vietnam, now he's being castigated. So it's really incredible. So go ahead.
Until some attempt is made to know these people and hear their broken cry, a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. And our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility to poverty, racism, and militarism. Let me say finally that I oppose the war in Vietnam because I love America. I speak out against this war not in anger, but with anxiety and sorrow in my heart, and above all with a passionate desire to see our beloved country stand as the moral example of the world. I speak out against this war because I'm disappointed with America. And there can be no great disappointment where there is no great love. I'm disappointed with our failure to deal positively and forthrightly with the triple evils of racism, economic exploitation, and militarism. We are presently moving down a dead-end road that can lead to national disaster. It is time for all people of conscience to call upon America to come back home. God has a way of standing before the nations with judgment, and it seems that I can hear God saying to America, "You are too arrogant." I haven't lost faith because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. We shall overcome because the Bible is right. You shall reap what you sow. With this faith, we will be able to speed up the day when all over the world we will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. With men will beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. And nations will not rise up against nations, neither shall they study war anymore. And I don't know about you, I ain't gonna study war no more.
Amazing. We've really been spoiled today with great speeches. Like just like studying Martin Luther King and Malcolm X has just been like a treat for listening to these little like speech snippets.
Yeah, because you know what? Like, especially that one, I don't remember being shown that one in school. Do you?
Oh, you never were. You were only shown one. There's only one.
There's only one, right? And it's like what, like an hour long, right? So like you're only gonna hear like 10, 15 minutes of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't think we picked David. The only thing I disagree with that statement is I don't think we picked barbarism. I think that like we weren't necessarily prepared to defend ourselves from the barbarism.
Correct. All right, let's go forward a little bit here.
If I can get it, there we go.
So, and in terms of Martin Luther King's, it may be kind of like touted that Martin Luther King was always just the darling of the United States and everyone was so supportive of him and his policy suggestions. But we can see here that views about Martin Luther King, what was prompted was, I'd like you to rate Dr. Martin Luther King on a scale. If you have a favorable opinion of him, name a number between +1, +5, or blah, blah, blah. So it shows here between 1963, 1964, 65, 66, and then all the way up to 2011. In 2011, you see that 69% of them stated they were highly favorable towards him. If you go down to August 1966, 44%, the majority of people were highly unfavorable towards Martin Luther King. And that came after, periods prior to that of some more favorability. But then in 1966, when you started talking about this rhetoric, you saw a growing disapproval for Dr. Martin Luther King in the mainstream.
But look at this brave 4%.
Yeah.
In 2011.
Yeah, 2011. Yeah, fuck him.
Yeah.
Go to the next one. The next one's almost crazier.
Public responses to the Martin Luther King assassination. When you heard the news of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., which one of the things listed on the card was your strongest reaction? Sadness, anger, shame, fear? Felt he brought it on himself? Holy shit!
Now, to be fair, sadness is number one, but in the not too distant second is
what the fuck is that?
Felt he brought it on himself is like the so, and that's like you have a couple boxes. You can either check sadness or like obviously maybe you can think both in some way, but like you have two options, and that's your choice.
Well, I mean, like I feel like this is the percentage that went on to like basically be the Black Panther Party.
Yeah.
And this is the part that went on to like join Congress right here.
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck this part is.
Yeah, where did they go?
Yeah, I guess these are the people that eventually voted to make MLK Day a holiday. And these are like, obviously like the reasonable people that are like, it's not going to be me next. I mean, like, there's always like, conversations about like, oh, there's the next like MLK, there's the next like, this or that, right? Or like, how come people don't like speak out against these things? And it's just like, I think people forget that like, that like a lot of these people, right, that speak out against these things, especially when they're incredibly successful, MLK, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, Huey, right, and like a bunch of other people. I'm sorry, I can't remember the fucking name of him, but like he was literally gunned down in his driveway. And then like think about all the people that were protesting, almost a decade ago now that wound up dead in the back of their cars, right? A lot of people from like, the George Floyd protest that wound up dead, George Jackson is another one, right?
Yeah, he went to Cuba, right?
George Jackson?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I think you're thinking of Asata.
No, George Jackson.
Did he go to Cuba?
Do you know who George Jackson is?
Yeah, he wrote Soledad Brother, right?
Oh wait, I'm thinking of a different guy. I'm sorry. Who's the guy that went to China and met with Mao? He was from Mississippi. He had the radio show, and he would do the radio show from Cuba. What was his name?
Radio show from Cuba.
Hold on, I have it. I have a book on it in my cart. Give me 1 second. His name, I think it was called like Radio Free
Dixie. Robert F. Williams.
That guy.
Never heard of him.
Can you click on his Wikipedia real quick? Can you bring up his Wikipedia page?
Sure.
Robert De Niro. That's who I meant. So go down. So he go down. Go down.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah. So he went to Cuba in '61 through Canada and Mexico. He regularly broadcasted addresses from Cuba to Southern blacks on Radio Free Dixie. He established a station with the approval of Cuban leader Fidel Castro, along with assistance of the government, and operated it from '62 to '65. During the missile crisis, he urged black soldiers in the U.S. armed forces who were prepping for a possible invasion of Cuba to engage in insurrection against the United States. And then if you go down, he went to Hanoi. And then he went to China, and there's him beating Mao. If you go down, yeah.
I wonder if he got to meet up. Yo, what the disillusionment? Whoa, what?
What'd you say?
Radio Free Europe offered him pay to broadcast for them. So far, he has refused, but he has not foreclosed making a deal with the government or the far right. He takes position that he is entitled to make any maneuver from jail or kidnapping.
Yeah, he has a book. It's pretty. I haven't read it or anything, but.
I wonder if he ever got to meet Hanoi Hannah.
Hannah Montana?
No, not Hannah Montana.
What did you say?
What's her name? She was the woman that, like, in Vietnam that knew English and would make, like, these addresses to, like, American troops being like, you're gonna die here, GI, go home.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
There we go. Became famous among U.S. soldiers for her propaganda broadcasts on Radio Hanoi. Her scripts were written by North Vietnamese Army, were intended to frighten and shame soldiers into leaving their posts. She made 3 broadcasts a day, reading a list of newly killed or imprisoned Americans and playing popular U.S. anti-war songs in an effort to incite feelings of nostalgia and homesickness, attempting to persuade GIs that the U.S. involvement in the Vietnam War was unjust and immoral. In fact, let me see here. Don't look at my recommendations. Stop looking.
Чего ты там пиздишь, чего?
GI, your government has abandoned you. They have
Can you
ordered
imagine
you
just
to
hearing
die,
this ringing out
GI.
over a
Do not
jungle
trust
while you were
them.
walking? From some, like,
Defect,
tree-implanted
GI.
radio that you
It
can't
is a
find?
very good idea to leave a sinking ship. They lie to you, GI. You know you cannot win this war.
It'd be over a harsh noise beat.
Oh, I already did a song like this. I was messing around with this. I don't know if you can tell that I've already watched this.
They will give you a medal, GI, but only after you are dead. Your government lies to you every day, poor soldier. You have lost this war, GI.
Well, yeah, you get the point. So, back to the graph.
Did you all look at the graph? Don't make me tap the graph again. All right, go ahead. Okay. Malcolm and Martin found common ground in an understanding of the global nature of racial struggle. They both fervently believed in the moral and political rightness of anti-colonial movements and in the right of self-determination for indigenous people. King called the personal and political ties that bound humanity together the world house, where the fates of individual nation-states, cities, towns, and hamlets were inextricably linked. Malcolm satisfied his own search for international political inspiration in the 1955 Afro-Asian Conference in Bandung, Indonesia, and an event that symbolized the Third World's political coming of age. Malcolm and Martin's political activism took place against the backdrop of the decolonization struggle, an epic fight where political revolutionaries challenged the prevailing social and political order of the last century.
Oh, there's no fucking subtitles available.
Sorry.
Than communism or Marxism or socialism or anything else. The Africanism is what they consider to be the real threat.
Yes.
Undoubtedly, one of the major elements at the center of Malcolm X's revolutionary strategy is solidarity, the natural solidarity which must be restored between the Afro-American and his African brother in their common fight against a common enemy.
The Organization of Afro-American Unity sees the only hope for the black man in America in a strong Africa, and the necessity of the Afro-American becoming inseparably linked with the overall program that's existing on the African continent. The two problems must be solved together, and the two forces must go forward together. And so the Organization of Afro-American Unity has a program to link the Afro-Americans with the Africans and the Africans with the Afro-Americans. When I say Afro-Americans, I mean those throughout the entire Western Hemisphere. This is our only hope. Our hope is in a strong Africa. And when Africa is strong, our position in America will be one of respect. But if Africa is weak, we will never be in a position of respect in America. They used to have a saying that one doesn't have a Chinaman's chance. But they don't say that anymore. They used that expression back when China was weak. But now since Mao Zedong has been successful in making China a strong country, the Chinese have more chance than anybody else. So this saying has become outdated. Well, just as it took a strong China to give a Chinese person respect wherever that Chinese person is found on this earth, when we get a strong Africa, the person of African origin or African ancestry will be respected any place on this earth, even in America. But he will not be respected in America until Africa is strong, just as the Chinaman wasn't respected abroad until China became strong.
He was a leader who knew that self-reliance is the only...
Thank you for commenting on the sub badge, Cycrum. You know, if you guys want to subscribe, that's how you get one. They're all going to be different colors. They're all going to look different as you keep going. We got colors we didn't even roll out yet, you know, because we haven't even been on that long.
We got a strong 3-month run going.
And independence. This is why he rejected the claims for white participation in the leadership of the Afro-American freedom movement. This is why he respected the example of the Chinese people in their revolutionary struggle. How did he view the success of China in developing nuclear weapons for her defense?
Well, I think it's one of the greatest things that has ever happened, because up until now, the nuclear devices have been in the hands of Europeans. They've exercised a monopoly over the nuclear weapons, or over the ability to produce nuclear weapons. But now the Chinese have evened it. They've equalized it by being successful, by being a non-white or non-European nation, and at the same time developing successfully the ability to produce nuclear weapons. So as far as I'm concerned, it was a very good thing, and I do hope that they are able to build bigger ones and better ones every day, because the only language that the European powers understand is the language of power. And a dark nation has to be in a position to talk or speak the language that these imperialists understand. And China has developed the ability to be in that position, and as long as she can speak the language that they understand, it's better for the other dark countries.
Yes, men like this live always in the shadow of danger. He was born in white America, but his vision reaches far beyond those limits. It goes deep into the future of the black man.
Today, for the first time, the black people of the West are beginning to look homeward. They're beginning to look back toward the mother continent of Africa, and they're gaining spiritual strength from these roots. The African continent is on the rise, the motherland is on the rise, and our people all over the Western Hemisphere are looking back at this rising continent and the unity of that continent, and it's giving us strength and hope for the future. And for the first time, not only is the black man on the African continent fighting and seeking and fighting for his place in the sun, but his fight is putting the same spirit in the black people in the West, and we are also seeking and fighting for our place in the sun, and we will not rest until that place has been secured.
What's your plan now?
I'm going back to the States first and see how my family is doing, you know.
Yes.
Got a family there. And see what develops.
My man said, I hope they build bigger nukes.
In New York, on February 21st, 1965, Brother Malcolm X fell before the bullets of assassins. His killers were those whose interest he knew would crumble before the irresistible force of worldwide revolution against racism and dollarism. Those who directed the murder of our courageous brother demonstrated their crazy belief that the ideas he fought for can be killed. They are wrong, because the voice of Malcolm X was the voice of our humanity. The words he spoke can never be silenced. They are the words and the determination of his people, a people fighting for their place in the sun, and will never rest until that place has been secured.
And fighting for our place in the sun, and we will not rest until that place has been secured.
There you go. Just a little, so like that last slide that we read about was talking about kind of like the association between Malcolm and Martin with like third world movements. So that was kind of like Malcolm supporting his, talking about African movements as well as China. This next one is a little bit of Martin Luther King's involvement with the third world, especially like in terms of the anti-colonial movements.
That's in communism or Marxism or socialism or anything else.
That's not this one. You got to skip. Yeah, there you go.
Pilgrimage to India.
There's a lot of Gandhi praise in this video. I know that there's things you can say about Gandhi, so just let's not.
Oh, there is.
Let's keep all that actually stuff. Jesus Christ. You know, I have a picture with chat. Can you pause this real quick? Hey, Chad, I don't know if you guys know, but I actually have a picture of me and myself in Mahatma Gandhi. I don't know. It was on the newspaper. Here's a Kerala newspaper here from Kannur, Kerala. And here I am on the cover of it with Gandhi. Can you see that?
Of course you do, Pat.
That's me and Gandhi. Surrounded by hammers and sickles.
And if you want like an excellent book to check out regarding like the history of Gandhi, right? And there's also some stuff about MLK and Malcolm X in here too. It's a book by Domenico Lacerdo called Nonviolence: A History Beyond the Myth. I don't know. That's backwards, isn't it?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it is, but it's still cool.
All right.
Sebs. He said I knew Pat was old. I love you guys. All right, so let's get it cracking here on this video. End it like Beckham, huh?
If this age is to survive, it must follow the way of love and nonviolence that he so nobly illustrated in his life.
They were not a perfect guy, but a lot of good things. Also part of the non-aligned movement.
There's a lot I could be saying right now, but I'll wait.
Okay, go ahead then. It's almost over. Shout out. So he met with land reform leaders. Marched to Rajasthan and met with Dalit students in Kerala. Shout out Kerala.
Just so everybody in chat knows, Pat, what is Dalit?
That's like the lower. That was like considered like the lower class people, I believe. Correct?
I believe that is like the untouchable class, is it not?
Yeah. So Dalits are previously known as untouchable, is the lowest stratum of the caste in India. So yeah, a Dalit is essentially the lowest caste in India, the poorest and most discriminated class.
Yeah, that class.
And he met them in Kerala, correct?
Yes.
I have a cool book about the way caste was dismantled in Kerala, called like, like something of a slave caste. I have to read it though.
Yeah, you're not allowed to speak to them. You're not allowed to look at them. You're not allowed to interact with them.
So these people would be used as servants, right? Mm-hmm. And there were certain roads that they could not be on. So they would be in a car with like as a servant, and they would pull up to certain roads, and they would have to get out of the car and walk around the block as the car drove up certain streets, and they would have to meet them by walking because by law they couldn't be in the same car on these streets. That's how Dalit servants used to have to live their life.
And Gandhi didn't exactly think that was like a priority. He was, I don't know, maybe going to get to it later or something.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we could say about Gandhi. I think there's a lot of weird sexual stuff about Gandhi.
Oh yeah, with his niece. Yeah,
I thought it was like young boys or something like that, but
it was his young niece that he would sleep naked to train himself not to give in to the temptation. The temptation to do what? I can only speculate. And you know, on top of like, do you know anything about what he did when he was younger?
No.
Oh,
I'm not a big Gandhi guy. I never really was like big on Gandhi that I like read about him, and like I think I kind of surpassed the whole Gandhi movement because
because he fucking sucks. Not gonna lie. He like, you know,
I think the image Cycrum, I think the image that probably Dr. Martin Luther King had in the 60s is a probably very idealized image of Gandhi that probably wasn't really reproached until like the past 10 to 20 years. Even in the 90s, I don't think anybody was really aware of any of those facts about Gandhi. And
today they're not.
You know, yeah.
Like, for instance, I don't think that, like, you know, MLK would have been too appreciative of the fact that, like, you know, Gandhi went out of his way to, recruit young Indian men to fight in the Boer Wars, right, against Africans just trying to be free from English colonialism.
Hey, Jay Kessis, thanks for the first time chat, and thanks for that information. Yeah, I didn't know that he had a weird, awkward arranged marriage with a young girl either.
Yeah, all of it's just...
Yeah, it seems there's a lot of mounting evidence to that. Just
I can do the wheel? There we go. That's way easier.
And here is Dr. King with Kwame Nkrumah, the Marxist-Leninist leader of Ghana, when Ghana made independence from the British colonial rule. Ghana made independence in the 1960s, and Dr. King was actually there for the Independence Day, and he recalled of the situation. As we walked out, we noticed all over the polo grounds almost 500,000 people. They had waited for this hour and this moment for years. King's reaction to the Ghanaians' triumph was outwardly emotional. Before I knew it, I started weeping. I was crying for joy, and I knew about all the struggles and all the pain and all the agony these people had gone through for this moment. This event The birth of this new nation will give impetus to oppressed people all over the world. I think it will have worldwide implications and repercussions, not only for Asia and Africa, but also for America. It renews my conviction in the ultimate triumph of justice, and it seems to me that this is fit testimony for the fact that eventually the forces of justice triumph in the universe, and somehow the universe itself is on the side of freedom and justice. So this gives new hope to me in the struggle for freedom. So, definitely, I don't think they show the picture of King with Nehru or Kwame when they go over kind of like who he was as a person. And I think it's important to know that he was, with these third world decolonial movements as well as, socialist to outright Marxist-Leninist movements as well. Not saying he supported them because there's no evidence. I mean, not saying that he subscribed to them, but he did support them.
Right.
I think this is this the last slide?
33.
I think this is the last one. Do you want to read the first paragraph? I'll read the second.
Sure.
Okay.
Throughout this book, I use the metaphor of the sword and the shield to argue for a new interpretation of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. Conventional depictions of Malcolm wielding a sword in pursuit of black dignity while King carried a shield for the defense of black humanity tell only part of the story. The Sword and the Shield argues that Martin and Malcolm, after beginning as rivals, developed a political partnership more clearly illuminated by examining the destinations they, respectively, reached toward the end of their lives. The personas they comfortably assumed at the start of their political careers grew as they matured. In the halls of the United States Senate, during their sole meeting, their only meeting, Malcolm and Martin traveled down a shared revolutionary path in search of black dignity, citizenship, and human rights that would trigger national and global political reckonings around issues of race and democracy that still reverberate today.
Malcolm X and Martin Luther King transformed the aesthetics of American democracy through social justice advocacy that altered national conceptions of race, citizenship, and democracy. By illuminating the relationship between black oppression and white supremacy, Malcolm and Martin permanently altered America's racial landscape. Their words both to freedom's cause and attracted praise, controversy, and condemnation. In popular culture, they represent opposing visions of racial equality, where King dreamed of carving a stone of hope from a mountain of racial despair. Malcolm forcefully identified a growing nightmare of racial injustice, Jim Crow segregation, and simmering rage. The neat juxtaposition obscures more than it reveals, erasing the profound ways in which their politics and activism overlapped and intersected, and oftentimes helped to transform national and global debates over racial and economic justice. The role of the criminal justice system, the use of violence, and the resilience of American democracy. Let's see, is there one more? Is that it? That's it?
I think that's it, bro.
All right.
Anyway.
Well, that's it for slides. We're done a little early today. How are you feeling?
Feeling pretty good, and like I'm okay with it being a little bit of a short one. Honestly, like,
let's bring this off the screen.
Yeah,
I hate it breaking the third wall with the presentation without it being in presentation. But
there's so like I really need to get good at like making sure that I'm not like doxing myself.
Yeah. So the next chapter that we'll be going over on Sunday is called, and you're going to you heard this throughout the first chapter. They keep referring to these two things, right? Radical dignity and radical citizenship. So the first chapter, that was the intro. This first chapter, this book has like dueling chapters where it alternates back and forth between Dr. King and Malcolm, Dr. King and Malcolm. So next, each chapter, each stream is going to be one focusing on Malcolm X, one focusing on Martin Luther King, and then so on and so forth. So this next chapter is called The Radical Dignity of Malcolm X. So the whole next chapter and the whole next stream is going to be focusing on the radical dignity of Malcolm X. And then after that, the next chapter will be the radical citizenship of Martin Luther King. So all that stuff that we just kind of like touched the top of throughout this intro is going to be expounded upon in much greater detail as we get through the rest of this book. I've been enjoying it. It's a cool change of pace from Black Shirts and Reds, so that we can like experience like these different eras of history, different concepts, even like a little bit different of like a political vibe. I'm enjoying it so far. What do you think?
I love it. I can't wait to get through, the rest of it. I think it's going to be very interesting. I don't know. For me, I love reading stuff that's not just like what's the word? Like revisionist, right? But just like more contemporary research and stuff like that. I always find very fascinating, especially when it's like regarding popular historical events or people that like we're already familiar with, you know?
Yeah. So I'm hyped. So what do you think? You said you were. This is great. I would love it. Oh, cool. Thanks, Jai Cassis. Sorry, Jikes. I'm sorry. Whoever. I'm sorry about your name. Cool. I appreciate the follow. That's awesome. I'm glad you enjoyed it. We will be back on Friday for a chill stream. So if you're new here, Wednesdays and Sundays we do our book review streams, and then on Fridays we just do a chill stream. We might have somebody in for an interview. We might just pop in with absolutely nothing prepared, or even if we just it's a no format Friday. So if there is something we really want to talk about, we'll set it as a date there if it falls outside of the regular scheduled book streams. But come hang out on Friday. You can even bring your own topics if there's anything you want to hear us talk about.
Yeah, tell your friends, and remember, you can always find previous episodes when I eventually upload them to YouTube.
He's really good at uploading them. Don't let anybody tell you. Within a day or two, they're all uploaded, and there's a whole back catalog. So yeah, it's good stuff.
Thanks, Sam.
Awesome, Sam. And also, Magoki, thank you so much. Maybe I can get you guys into Minecraft.
I don't know about all that.
I play Diablo 2 and Magic the Gathering online. And I've recently been playing Age of Empires 2 Definitive Edition. So if anybody wants to watch me play those, I will play them.
Maybe we'll just get Pat to like play Age of Empires, and I'll just like, I don't know, info dump on him the entire time.
I just played Age of Empire, and they said, please no.
No, I mean, like, look, man. Fortnite.
We're not a video game stream. We're not a gamer stream.
It seems tempting, but no, I'm not gonna do that on stream.
We're not gamers.
Not really.
I play video games sometimes, and I'm just like, oh.
Thanks,
hey,
Sam.
Sam, that's awesome. Thanks for gifting the sub to Monsieur Balls.
Oh, and if we're ever like, fucking in the middle of something, right? Because I gotta figure out. There's a lot I need to figure out about Twitch. Obviously, the most important aspect of this stream, right, is that we go over literature, right? And like, hopefully we make it more entertaining for you to read, right? Like, hopefully we make some of this more interesting for you to read. So part of that is that, like, if we're in the middle of talking about stuff and like, an ad pops up or whatever, just let me know. There's only like 30 of us in here. I can't even tell. I don't even fucking have an accurate count.
People here now, but we've pretty much been hovering between 20 and 30 all night, which is pretty cool.
There's like 22 of us. Like, I'm sorry for everybody that does have, a sub, but like, I'll just sit here. Me and Pat will just wait till the ads are over and we can get back to business. And we'll like keep talking.
Also, if you're into the Discord, there's a PDF for the book that we have there, so for free, so you can follow along with the reading too. And I don't know if anybody's been doing this or not, but I always urge it. You don't have to. I mean, if you want to, be part of this is an interactive situation. This isn't just me and Johnny dictating information to you. If you want to read along and you have your own points that you want to bring up, like, please do. I would love that type of participation. So if you want to check out the Discord and read the next chapter, The Radical Dignity of Malcolm X, and come in on Sunday with your own points that you want to bring up, feel free to do so. Seps.
But not for real, but this is a book club. More than anything, right? I want people to understand that, this isn't like just me and Pat, like yelling at you guys about the book.
But we will.
And yes, it is very cute watching Pat promote the Discord because he's never in it.
I'm not promoting it. I want people to have the book. So if you want the PDF,
if you want to talk to Pat, you gotta watch us live.
little 3 hours. It's actually lighter than what we've been doing. We've been doing like over 4.
Bro, we did like 5 hours the other night, and I think that like that's okay. This OBS is still stressing me out. So
yeah,
like,
I was really stressed out. I don't know if you guys could tell, but in the beginning, I was like having a really hard time. I think I'm getting the hang of it now, but just it's so much different than StreamYard.
it's incredibly different from StreamYard. I can have as many tabs and other things going on, and like looking at chat, and you know.
Yeah, it's a little bit more stressful for sure. Yeah,
But it looks
Sam's
better,
saying-
right, guys? Right?
Yeah, can we get like some kind of like a feedback in the chat? What do you think of the new layout and everything? Obviously, the overlays for the alerts are a fucking disaster. I don't know how people deal with that.
Yeah, we gotta figure out how to do that, and we're gonna talk to our producer Sebs, and you know.
I don't know if pretty much the alert notifications were hijacked by literal anti-Semites and racists.
Oh, they were.
I ignored them so that not to bring attention to it, but it was pretty fucking disgusting what they were doing there.
Yeah.
You all need a zoomer to help out. We got Sebs.
Hi.
What is that disembodied voice?
Yeah, where the fuck did that come from?
God?
Yeah, shout out to Sebs. We would have been so lost. We would have still been on StreamYards. We would have just done that for eternity if we didn't have his help.
Yeah, so follow Sebs Dev, and when do you stream, Sebs? Do you have like a
when I can.
When it can, you know.
The specter of Sebs.
I'm always live, actually. I just don't know about it.
I'm trying to take some of the work off of your shoulders, Sam, because like our extremely dedicated mod Sam, right, is always just like socials and Discord. Here's a PDF of the book. Check out this YouTube link. Meanwhile, like I'm this close to just doxing myself live on stream every time.
What do you guys think of the book? Like, I mean, obviously, venturing into new content. What's the vibe on the book so far?
Yeah, this will be like I think one of the first books we're doing where I don't know if there's gonna be any Cold War or anything in it.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like normally we're going to be reading tons of book about the Cold War, about Third World stuff. That's where I really thrive in that department. But seems also really fun.
Yeah, and also just because like I think it's going to be extremely relevant for everything that's going to be going on this month.
Yeah, I'm bad on American history unless it's like America doing the CIA doing things in other countries. Like that's like my main focus on American history.
Yeah, they're complementary. Less than opposite. I think they're more complementary than it. I'm literally doing like a sword and shield thing. I don't know if you can tell by like the stupid hand gestures I'm doing.
I could.
So yeah.
You got anything planned for Friday, or are we just going in blind?
I don't fucking know, man. Maybe I'll ask somebody to come on. I don't know. Half the time I'm doing it like the day beforehand.
Yeah. If not, I don't mind. We've had fun the times that we've just gone on completely, completely blind, and it's actually the past 2 times we did that. It actually was pretty great. So don't feel too much pressure to like arrange something.
What are you hemming about, David? Do you want to come on?
You want to come on? You want to come on and talk on?
Yeah. All right. Yeah.
You free at 6 o'clock on Friday?
My man's going through his schedule right now.
Free, don't worry.
What?
Oh, Sebs, you're going to be on there. You're very quickly becoming the third host to this. What am I missing? New host unlocked.
Okay, it's fine. It's good.
All right.
Sorry. Okay, yeah. So it's settled. David will be breaking through from the chat and joining us on stream, and it's very exciting.
All right, so who do we feel like raiding out to today? I think we should raid Feminist Critique.
Hash Kush. I found the book because I used to volunteer at a bookstore, like a collective bookstore in Philadelphia, and it was just sitting on the shelf, and I bought it at a 15% discount. Cool. It's fun, and it's also cool, funly cool. All right, I'm gonna head out. We're just raiding out at this point, right? We don't have anything else going on.
All right, we're gonna stop the recording.